You'll find your mate when the moon goddess wills it. Every wolf has their destined one. That's what Kira's grandmother whispered to her every night before bed, stroking her hair with weathered hands that smelled of sage and hope. But when you're the only wolf in your pack without a scent, when you're invisible to every mate bond in existence, you learn that destiny has favorites, and you were never meant to be one of them. Tonight, at the annual mating ceremony of the Northern Territories, Kira would discover that being forgettable was a gift compared to what awaited her, because sometimes, the cruelest twist of fate isn't being overlooked. It's being seen by someone who could destroy you with a single word. Chapter 1. The Scentless Wolf. The grand hall of the Silver Pine Pack gleamed with 1,000 candles, their flames dancing like excited whispers against the vaulted ceiling. Kira pressed herself against the cold stone wall near the servants' entrance, making herself as small as possible, a skill she'd perfected over 23 years of existing in the margins. Around her, wolves in their finest ceremonial garments laughed and preened, their excitement electric in the air. This was the night every unmated wolf dreamed of, the mating ceremony, where the moon goddess's bonds would pulse to life, drawing destined pairs together in an undeniable pull that transcended logic, status, and choice. Everyone except Kira. "Oh, don't lurk in the shadows, Kira dear. You'll frighten the children." The voice was honey-sweet and poison-sharp. Kira's stomach clenched as her half-sister Vivienne glided toward her, resplendent in a gown of silver silk that matched her luminous eyes. Eyes they'd both inherited from their father, though Vivienne seemed to sparkle while Kira's always appeared dull in comparison. "I wasn't lurking," Kira said quietly, keeping her gaze lowered. "Mother asked me to help with." "Mother asked you to stay out of sight," Vivienne interrupted, her smile never faltering. "There's a difference, darling. With all the important alphas here tonight, we can't have you confusing things." Confusing things. The diplomatic way of saying, we can't let anyone realize the alpha's legitimate daughter has no scent, no wolf presence, no value. Kira's fingers curled into the rough fabric of her plain gray dress, the one her stepmother, Luna Margaret, had specifically chosen for her. Not quite servant garb, but close enough to signal her place in the hierarchy. "Vivienne, sweetheart." Luna Margaret's melodious voice carried across the hall. She swept toward them. A vision in midnight blue, her auburn hair piled high and woven with moonstones. Her smile was radiant until her gaze landed on Kira, then it cooled by several degrees. "Kira, I thought I made it clear you were to remain in the kitchen until the ceremony concluded." "I just wanted to," Kira began. "What you want is irrelevant." Margaret's voice dropped low, meant only for Kira's ears. "Your father may have been too weak to reject you outright, but I won't have you embarrassing this family. Not tonight. Not when every pack in the Northern Territories is watching." The words hit like physical blows, but Kira had learned long ago not to flinch. Showing pain only encouraged more of it. "Yes, Luna," she whispered. "Good girl." Margaret's smile returned, bright and false. "Now run along. I'm sure there are dishes that need washing." Vivienne giggled a sound like breaking glass and linked her arm through their mother's. "Come on, Mother. Alpha Damien just arrived, and you know how particular he is about protocols." They swept away in a rustle of silk and smugness, leaving Kira alone once more. She should leave. Should retreat to the kitchen where she belonged, where the other servants would offer sympathetic looks but never quite meet her eyes, where she could pretend her heart wasn't breaking for the 1,000th time. Instead, she stayed, because hidden in the shadows of the grand hall, she could watch what she'd never have. She could see wolves find their mates, witness their eyes light up with recognition and wonder, as the moon goddess's gift settled over them like stardust. She could pretend, just for a moment, that she was normal. The great doors at the hall's entrance suddenly swung open with enough force to silence every conversation. A wave of power rolled through the room so thick, so suffocating, that Kira's knees nearly buckled. This wasn't the ordinary dominance of an alpha. This was something primordial, ancient, terrifying. Announcing His Majesty, King Theron Blackfang, Supreme Alpha of the Northern Territories. Kira's breath caught. She'd heard stories about the Alpha King her entire life. Legends whispered in hushed tones. A wolf who'd claimed his throne at 18 by defeating 3 rival alphas in single combat. A ruler so powerful that even mentioning his name incorrectly could be considered an insult to your pack. A male who hadn't attended a mating ceremony in over a decade, preferring isolation in his fortress at Black Ridge Mountain, and now he was here. Theron Blackfang entered the grand hall like a storm given flesh. He stood easily 6.5 feet tall, broad-shouldered and radiating lethal grace. His hair was black as a raven's wing, pulled back to reveal a face that looked carved from granite, all sharp angles and harsh lines, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. But it was his eyes that stole the breath from Kira's lungs, molten gold, burning with an intensity that seemed to pierce through every pretense and protection. He wore all black, a tailored suit that somehow made him look more dangerous, not civilized. At his side hung a short sword, the blade etched with runes that glowed faintly even in the candlelight. The entire hall had fallen silent. Wolves who'd been laughing moments ago now stood frozen, their instincts screaming at them to submit, to lower their gazes, to not draw his attention. Alpha William, Kira's father, rushed forward with Luna Margaret at his side, both of them bowing deeply. "Your Majesty," William stammered, his usually commanding voice reduced to something small and uncertain. "We are honored beyond measure by your presence. We had no idea you would grace our humble ceremony." Theron's gaze swept across the hall with cold assessment. When he spoke, his voice was deep and rough, like gravel and silk woven together. "I'm looking for someone." The words sent a ripple of speculation through the crowd. The Alpha King, searching for someone at a mating ceremony? After years of refusing to attend any such event? "Of course, Your Majesty," Margaret said, her smile strained. "Anyone in our pack would be thrilled to." "Not in your pack." Theron moved deeper into the hall, and the crowd parted before him like water before a ship's prow. His eyes scanned the assembled wolves with methodical precision, dismissing each one in turn. Kira knew she should move, should retreat, before his attention could fall on her. But she was frozen, transfixed by the sheer presence of him. His gaze swept past her once, twice, then stopped. Those molten gold eyes locked onto her with an intensity that made her heart forget how to beat. No, this couldn't be happening. He couldn't be looking at her. There must be someone behind her, someone important, someone who actually mattered. Theron moved, not toward the alphas clustered in the center of the hall. Not toward Vivienne, who was staring at him with naked hunger in her silver eyes. Toward Kira. The crowd gasped. Kira heard her stepmother's sharp intake of breath, her father's confused murmur. The Alpha King stopped directly in front of her. Up close, he was even more devastating. Power radiated from him in waves that made her wolf the weak. Barely their presence, she'd always been ashamed of cower and whimper inside her chest. "You," he said, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. "What's your name?" Kira's mouth had gone dry. "Kira, Your Majesty." His eyes narrowed, studying her with an intensity that felt like being flayed open. Then, so quietly she almost didn't catch it, he muttered, "Perfect," before she could ask what he meant. Theron reached out and took her hand. The contact sent electricity racing up her arm. She gasped, not from pain, but from the sheer shock of being touched by him. He pulled her forward, into the center of the hall, where every eye could see them. "I have an announcement," Theron said, his voice carrying easily through the cavernous space. "As of this moment, Kira of the Silver Pine Pack is under my personal protection." The hall erupted in shocked whispers. Kira's father looked like he might faint. Margaret's face had gone white with fury, but Theron wasn't finished. He turned to Kira, and something flickered in those golden eyes, something desperate and dangerous, and resigned. Then he leaned down, his lips close to her ear, and whispered 4 words that would change everything. "Pretend you're my mate." Chapter 2. The Proposal of Deception. Kira's world tilted. For a moment, she thought she'd misheard him. The Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in all the Northern Territories, couldn't have just asked her to pretend to be his mate. That was insane, impossible, the kind of lie that got wolves executed for treason. But when she looked up into Theron's face, she saw the truth in those molten gold eyes. He was deadly serious. "I don't," she began, her voice barely a whisper. His grip on her hand tightened, not painfully, but enough to silence her. "Not here," he murmured, his gaze sweeping across the stunned crowd. Play along, or we're both dead. Dead? What could possibly threaten an Alpha King? Before Kira could process the terror racing through her veins, Theron turned back to the assembled wolves, his expression smoothing into one of cold authority. The mating ceremony will proceed as planned, he announced. But Kira will be leaving with me tonight. She is mine now. The possessiveness in that last word sent shivers down Kira's spine, and judging by the way several wolves in the crowd swayed on their feet, she wasn't the only one affected by the raw dominance in his tone. Alpha William found his voice first, though it came out strangled. Your Majesty, that is, Kira is she promised to another? Theron's question cut through the air like a blade. William's mouth opened and closed uselessly. Because what could he say? That Kira was worthless? That no wolf had ever wanted her? That she was an embarrassment to the Silverpine Pack? Luna Margaret, ever the politician, stepped forward with a gracious smile that didn't reach her eyes. Of course not, Your Majesty. Kira is unattached. We are simply surprised by this honor. She's never shown any particular gifts. The insult was delicate but unmistakable. She's nobody. Why would you want her? Something dangerous flickered in Theron's expression. I don't recall asking for your assessment of her worth, Luna Margaret. His voice dropped to a register that made the candles flicker. Unless you're suggesting I've made a poor choice? Margaret's face went pale. No. Of course not, Your Majesty. I would never presume. Good. Theron's smile was all teeth and no warmth. Then we have no problem. Kira, come. He didn't wait for her response. He simply turned and began walking toward the exit, still holding her hand, pulling her along as if she weighed nothing. Kira stumbled after him, her mind reeling. Behind them, the hall erupted in a cacophony of whispers and gasps. She caught a glimpse of Vivienne's face twisted with jealousy and rage, and her father's expression of pure bewilderment. But it was Luna Margaret's look that would haunt her, cold calculation, as if she were already plotting how to turn this situation to her advantage. The cool night air hit Kira like a slap as they exited the grand hall. Theron's grip remained firm as he led her through the courtyard, past the ornamental gardens where mating pairs often sealed their bonds, toward a massive black carriage that looked like it had been carved from obsidian. 2 wolves flanked the carriage royal guards, Kira realized, their eyes glowing amber in the darkness. They bowed as Theron approached, but their gazes lingered on Kira with undisguised curiosity. Inside, Theron commanded, releasing her hand to open the carriage door himself. Kira hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to refuse, to demand answers before she climbed into a carriage with the most dangerous predator in the realm. But where would she run? Back to the pack that had spent her entire life making her feel worthless? Back to a stepmother who would now see her as a threat rather than merely an inconvenience? And beneath the fear, beneath the confusion, a tiny spark of something else flickered to life. Curiosity. For the first time in her life, someone powerful had chosen her. Even if it was a lie, even if it was for reasons she didn't understand, someone had looked at invisible, scentless Kira, and said, yes. Her. She climbed into the carriage. The interior was as luxurious as she'd expected, velvet seats in deep crimson, walls lined with dark wood and silver filigree. But what struck her most was the scent. Pine and smoke, and something wild, untamed. His scent. Theron followed her inside, the carriage dipping under his weight. He knocked twice on the roof, and the vehicle lurched into motion with surprising smoothness. For several long moments, they sat in silence. Kira kept her gaze fixed on her hands, folded in her lap, acutely aware of how out of place she looked in her plain gray dress, surrounded by such opulence. You can speak freely now, Theron said finally, his voice losing some of its commanding edge. The carriage is spelled against eavesdropping. Kira lifted her head. In the dim light filtering through the curtained windows, Theron looked somehow both more and less dangerous, his features softer, but his eyes haunted by shadows she couldn't name. Why? The question burst from her lips before she could stop it. Why me? Why would you need to pretend? Because tomorrow night, every unmated alpha in the Northern Territories will gather at Blackridge Mountain for for the summit of crowns. Theron interrupted, his jaw tight. And they're bringing their daughters, their sisters, their eligible females, all vying to become my queen. Kira blinked. Isn't that good? You need a mate, an heir. I need, Theron said, his voice dropping to something raw and bitter, to not be shackled to a political marriage with a she-wolf, whose family will spend the rest of my reign trying to manipulate me through her. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and for the first time Kira saw past the armor of power to the exhausted male beneath. For 10 years, I've refused every mating ceremony, every introduction, every casual meeting arranged by ambitious alphas. I've made it clear I have no interest in taking a queen. But 3 months ago, the Council of Elders invoked an ancient law. If I don't produce an heir within the year, they can call for a challenge to my throne. Kira's breath caught. They would dare. They would dare because they're terrified of me, Theron said flatly. A king without a mate, without heirs, without weaknesses. I'm too unpredictable. Too powerful. They want me bound by family, by loyalty to a queen's pack, by the vulnerability that comes with loving something more than your crown. He looked up at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her forget how to breathe. So, I need a mate who isn't real. A female who can play the role convincingly enough to satisfy the elders, but who has no pack backing, no political connections, no reason to think she can control me. His lips curved into a humorless smile. A female who's so invisible, so overlooked, that no one will question why she disappears when this charade is over. The words should have hurt. They were meant to be insulting, a reminder of everything Kira lacked, but instead, something cold and analytical settled over her mind. Because Theron Blackfang wasn't wrong. She was invisible. She did have no connections, no value, no one who would miss her if she vanished. And for the first time, those facts might actually be useful. What's in it for me? She asked quietly. Theron's eyebrows rose slightly, as if he hadn't expected her to negotiate. You'll live in luxury at Blackridge Mountain. Servants, fine clothes, anything you want. I don't care about luxury, Kira interrupted, surprised by her own boldness. I want my freedom. When this is over, when you've satisfied the council, I want to leave. Not back to Silver Pines, somewhere new. With enough gold to start over, to build a life where no one knows I'm the scentless wolf who couldn't even attract a mate bond. For a long moment, Theron studied her. Then, slowly, he nodded. Done. Play your role well, and when the year is up, I'll give you enough gold to live comfortably for the rest of your life. Plus a recommendation letter to any pack you choose. You'll be free. Free. The word tasted like honey and hope, and everything Kira had never dared to dream. She extended her hand. Then we have a deal, Your Majesty. Theron's large hand engulfed hers, his skin warm and rough with calluses. Theron, he corrected. If you're going to pretend to be my mate, you should probably use my name. Theron, she repeated, testing the feel of it on her tongue. His eyes darkened at the sound, and for just a moment, something flickered across his face, something that looked almost like regret. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual mask of cold authority. We'll arrive at Blackridge Mountain by dawn, he said, releasing her hand. You should rest. Tomorrow, your lessons begin. Lessons? In how to be a queen. His smile was sharp as broken glass. Because if the other alphas suspect for even a moment that you're not truly my mate, they'll tear you apart to get to me, and I don't intend to let that happen. The promise in those words should have been comforting. Instead, it sent ice racing down Kira's spine, because she was beginning to realize that the Alpha King wasn't protecting her out of kindness. He was protecting her the way a chess player protects a valuable piece, useful only as long as she served her purpose. And the moment she stopped being useful, Kira had a feeling she'd discover exactly how ruthless Theron Blackfang could be. Subscribe if you believe Kira deserves better than being a pawn in someone else's game. Because wolves like Kira need an audience that won't abandon them when the stakes get deadly. Drop a comment if Kira's situation feels all too familiar, being chosen only when you're useful, never when you're valued. Chapter 3. The Castle of Shadows. Kira didn't sleep. How could she, when every lurch of the carriage reminded her that she was hurtling toward a fate she couldn't begin to comprehend? Instead, she sat rigid against the velvet seat, watching Theron through her lashes as he stared out the window at the passing darkness. He hadn't spoken again after his warning about the other alphas. Hadn't offered comfort or reassurance. He simply sat there, a statue carved from stone and silence, so still that she might have thought him asleep if not for the tension radiating from every line of his body. What kind of king was so powerful that even sitting motionless, he made the air feel heavy with threat? As dawn began to paint the sky in shades of amber and rose, the carriage climbed higher into the mountains. The temperature dropped, and Kira shivered in her thin dress. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying not to let her teeth chatter. Without a word, Theron shrugged off his black coat and tossed it to her. "I don't need," she began. "Put it on." Not a request, a command. The coat was still warm from his body, carrying that intoxicating scent of pine and smoke. Kira pulled it around her shoulders, drowning in fabric that had been tailored for someone twice her size. But it was warm, and right now, warmth was more precious than pride. "Thank you," she murmured. Theron's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The carriage rounded a final bend, and suddenly Black Ridge Mountain revealed itself in all its terrible glory. The fortress rose from the mountain peak like a crown of thorns, all black stone and sharp angles, with towers that clawed at the sky. Unlike the warm, welcoming architecture of Silver Pine, Black Ridge looked designed to repel, to intimidate, to remind anyone who approached that they were entering the domain of something ancient and deadly. Gargoyles perched on every ledge, their stone faces frozen in eternal snarls. The main gate was carved with runes that glowed faintly blue protective wards, Kira realized, powerful enough that she could feel them humming against her skin even from this distance. "Home sweet home," Theron said dryly, catching her expression of barely concealed horror. The carriage passed through the gates, and Kira felt the wards wash over her, a sensation like being submerged in ice water, testing her, weighing her, deciding whether she was threat or guest. Then they were through, pulling into a courtyard where dozens of wolves stood waiting. Not servants. Warriors. Every single one of them was massive, scarred, radiating the kind of controlled violence that came from years of combat. They wore matching black uniforms with the Black Fang crest. A wolf's head wreathed in silver flames emblazoned on their chests. The moment the carriage stopped, they dropped to one knee in perfect unison. "Your Majesty," they said as one, their voices a rumble of thunder. Theron opened the carriage door and descended, his movements fluid as water. He didn't acknowledge the kneeling warriors, didn't even glance at them. Instead, he turned back and offered his hand to Kira. She stared at that outstretched hand, large, scarred, capable of crushing bone with ease, and understood what he was really offering. A choice. She could take his hand and step into this new role, into this dangerous game of deception. Or she could refuse, retreat back into the carriage, and he would likely return her to Silver Pine without another word. Back to Luna Margaret's cruelty. Back to being invisible. Kira placed her hand in his. The warrior's eyes tracked the movement, and she heard several sharp intakes of breath. Because the Alpha King never touched anyone, never showed favor, never offered his hand to anyone, not even other alphas, and he'd just helped her, a nobody from a minor pack, out of his personal carriage, as if she were something precious. The weight of their stares pressed against Kira's skin like physical touch. She wanted to shrink, to hide, to apologize for existing, but Theron's grip tightened on her hand, anchoring her. "This is Kira," he announced, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "She is under my protection. Anyone who harms her, insults her, or questions her authority answers to me, personally." The threat in those final words was unmistakable. Several warriors visibly paled. "Commander Rylan," Theron called out. One of the warriors rose, a mountain of a male with silver hair and a face that looked like it had been through a meat grinder and come out meaner. He approached with military precision, his gray eyes assessing Kira with the cold efficiency of someone cataloging weaknesses. "Your Majesty, Kira will need a full wardrobe appropriate for a queen. Have the royal seamstress attend to her immediately. She'll also need a lady's maid, someone discreet, loyal, and capable of teaching court etiquette." Theron paused, his gaze never leaving Rylan's face. "And someone who understands that gossip about the queen's origins would be considered treason." Rylan's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Understanding. And perhaps the faintest hint of pity. Of course, Your Majesty. I'll see to it personally. Good. Theron finally released Kira's hand, and she immediately felt the loss of his warmth. Take her to the Queen's quarters. I have matters to attend to. He turned to leave, his coat billowing behind him, and then stopped. Without looking back, he said, Kira, you did well. Keep doing well, and you'll survive this. Then he was gone, striding toward the fortress's main entrance with his warriors falling into formation behind him like shadows. Kira stood alone in the courtyard, wrapped in a coat that smelled like the most dangerous predator alive, wondering what she'd just agreed to. This way, Miss Kira. She turned to find a young woman approaching petite, with auburn hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes the color of moss. She wore a simple black dress with white trim, and when she curtsied, the movement was so practiced it seemed effortless. I'm Alara, the woman said, her voice warm despite her formal demeanor. I've been assigned as your lady's maid. His Majesty thought you might prefer someone closer to your own age, rather than one of the more intimidating senior staff. Something about the way she said it with just a hint of conspiratorial humor made Kira's shoulders relax slightly. Thank you, Kira said. I appreciate that. Alara's smile widened. Come on then. Let's get you out of that dress. Her nose wrinkled slightly. No offense, but whoever chose that for you has terrible taste. Despite everything, the fear, the confusion, the overwhelming strangeness of her situation, Kira found herself smiling. The Queen's quarters were located in the Eastern Tower, accessible only by a winding staircase that seemed designed to exhaust potential assassins. By the time they reached the top, Kira's legs were burning, and her breath came in short gasps. Alara, infuriatingly, wasn't even winded. The altitude takes some getting used to, she said kindly, pushing open a set of massive oak doors carved with phases of the moon. Give it a few days. Then Kira stepped inside and forgot all about her burning lungs. The Queen's quarters were vast, a series of interconnected rooms that flowed into each other like a song. The main chamber featured floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the mountains, their peaks still crowned with snow even in late spring. A massive four-poster bed dominated one corner, draped in midnight blue silk that seemed to shimmer with starlight. But it was the bookshelf that caught Kira's attention. An entire wall of leather-bound volumes, more books than she'd ever seen in one place. The previous queen was a scholar, Alara said softly, following Kira's gaze. She collected rare texts from across the realm. His Majesty has kept everything exactly as she left it. Previous queen? Kira's heart sank. Of course Theron had been married before. Had loved before. What happened to her? Alara's expression shuddered. She died. 10 years ago. His Majesty doesn't speak of it, and we've learned not to ask. She moved toward an adjoining room, clearly eager to change the subject. Come, the seamstress will be here soon, and we should get you bathed first. The bathing chamber was another revelation. A massive copper tub fed by heated springs that rose through the mountain itself. Alara added oils that smelled of lavender and moonflower, and for the first time in what felt like years, Kira let herself relax. As she sank into the hot water, Alara began unpinning her hair, working through the tangles with surprising gentleness. May I speak plainly, Miss Kira? Alara asked after a moment. Please, and just Kira is fine. Kira, then. Alara's hand stilled. The entire castle is buzzing with speculation about you. No one expected His Majesty to return from the mating ceremony with anyone. He's been so adamant about remaining unmated. Kira's stomach twisted. I imagine they're disappointed. I'm not exactly. They're curious, Alara interrupted firmly. There's a difference. His Majesty is. He's a good king. Fair. Just. But he's also terrifying, and none of us have ever seen him show interest in anyone. So when he arrives with a female and declares her under his protection, she resumed working on Kira's hair. That's not disappointment you're sensing. That's everyone trying to figure out who you are and why you matter. Why you matter. As if Kira had ever mattered to anyone. I'm nobody, Kira said quietly. I'm just You're the female the Alpha King chose, Alara said. That makes you somebody, whether you feel like it or not. Before Kira could respond, a sharp knock echoed through the chambers. That'll be Madame Thorne, Alara said, helping Kira from the bath and wrapping her in a robe of such soft fabric it felt like wearing clouds. The royal seamstress. Fair warning, she's brilliant but terrifying. Don't let her bully you into anything uncomfortable. The woman who swept into the queen's quarters was exactly as described, a tall, rail-thin she-wolf with silver hair piled into an elaborate crown and eyes that missed nothing. She took one look at Kira and made a sound somewhere between a hum and a growl. Well, Madame Thorne said, circling Kira like a predator. His Majesty certainly chose a challenge. Kira bristled. I'm sorry if I'm not. Not a challenge for me, girl. A challenge for them. Madame Thorne gestured vaguely toward the windows, toward the realm beyond. Every she-wolf in the Northern Territories will be comparing themselves to you, trying to figure out what you have that they don't. And you, she poked Kira's shoulder, you don't carry yourself like you have anything at all. We'll need to fix that. For the next 3 hours, Kira was measured, pinned, draped in fabrics ranging from silk to velvet to materials she couldn't even name. Madame Thorne worked with terrifying efficiency, barking orders at 2 assistants who'd appeared from nowhere, creating sketches faster than Kira could blink. She'll need a wardrobe fit for a queen, Madame Thorne muttered, more to herself than anyone else. Formal gowns for the summit, day dresses for court appearances, riding habits, sleeping gowns, and… She paused, her expression softening slightly, something that makes her feel like herself. What colors do you favor, child? Kira blinked, surprised to be asked her opinion. I've always liked blue. Deep blue, like the sky just before full dark. Madame Thorne nodded approvingly. Midnight blue with silver accents. It'll complement your coloring. You have lovely eyes, we should draw attention to them. She made another note. I'll have the first batch ready by tomorrow evening. For tonight's dinner, I'll send up something appropriate from the existing stores. Tonight's dinner? Kira asked. Alara winced. The summit begins tomorrow, but tonight His Majesty is hosting a private dinner for the Inner Council. They'll want to meet you, to assess whether… She trailed off uncomfortably. Whether I'm worthy of him. Kira finished flatly. Whether you'll survive them. Alara corrected. The Inner Council consists of the realm's 5 most powerful alphas. They're the ones who invoked the ancient law forcing His Majesty to take a mate, and they're not happy that he found a solution before they could control the situation. A chill raced down Kira's spine. They'll see right through the deception. Then don't let them. Madame Thorne's voice was sharp as a whip. You're the Alpha King's chosen mate. Act like it. Believe it. Make them believe it. She gathered her materials with brisk efficiency. The gown will be delivered within the hour. Don't embarrass me by slouching. Then she was gone in a whirlwind of fabric and stern disapproval. Kira sank onto the edge of the massive bed, her head spinning. A private dinner with the most powerful alphas in the realm, wolves who would be looking for any sign of weakness, any hint that she didn't belong. I can't do this, she whispered. Alara sat beside her, her expression sympathetic but firm. You can, because the alternative is admitting the truth, and if these alphas discover His Majesty lied to them, they'll use it as grounds to challenge his throne, and you'll be executed for conspiracy. The words hit like a physical blow. So you smile, Alara continued, and you let them underestimate you, because that's what they'll do. They'll look at you and see a weak little wolf from a minor pack, and when they dismiss you, when they stop paying attention because they think you're harmless, she smiled, and there was something fierce in it. That's when you watch, and you listen, and you learn everything you need to survive. Kira looked at this young woman who'd been nothing but kind to her, and saw something unexpected. An ally. Why are you helping me? She asked. Alara's smile faded. Because 10 years ago, I watched His Majesty lose everything, and I've spent the last decade watching him turn into something cold and untouchable. She met Kira's gaze steadily. I don't know why he chose you, but I know he chose you when he could have chosen anyone. That means something, and I'd like to see if maybe you can remind him what it's like to be something other than alone. But I do know. Before Kira could respond, Alara stood and moved toward the door. The gown will arrive soon. I'll help you dress. Until then, try to rest. You're going to need your strength. Alone once more, Kira moved to the windows and stared out at the mountains stretching endlessly in every direction. Somewhere in this fortress, Theron was preparing for tonight's dinner, preparing to present her to the wolves who wanted to tear him down, and Kira realized with sudden, crystal clarity that this wasn't just about her freedom anymore. If she failed, if she couldn't convince these alphas that she was truly Theron's mate, it wouldn't just be her life at stake. It would be his throne, his legacy, everything he'd built. Play your role well, he'd said. Kira squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, and made a silent vow. She would play the role of queen so convincingly that even she might start to believe it. And perhaps, just perhaps, she'd discover that the scentless wolf who'd spent her life being invisible had always possessed the one gift that mattered most: the ability to become anyone she needed to be. Chapter 4. The Inner Council. The gown that arrived was a masterpiece of midnight blue silk that shimmered like captured starlight. It hugged Kira's curves in a way that made her feel simultaneously exposed and powerful. With silver embroidery tracing delicate patterns across the bodice, wolves running through moonlit forests, their forms so intricate they seemed to move when she breathed. Alara had worked magic with her hair, pulling it into an elegant updo that left a few loose tendrils framing her face. A silver circlet, simple but unmistakably regal, rested against her forehead. "You look like a queen," Alara said softly, stepping back to admire her work. Kira stared at her reflection in the full-length mirror and barely recognized herself. Gone was the plain, forgettable wolf in gray servant's garb. In her place stood someone who looked like they belonged in a castle, like they deserved to stand beside a king, but appearances were deceiving. Kira knew that better than anyone. "I don't know how to be her," she whispered. "This person I'm supposed to be." Alara moved to stand beside her, meeting her gaze in the mirror. "Then don't be her. Be yourself. Just the version of yourself who refuses to apologize for taking up space." She adjusted the circlet slightly. "His Majesty chose you for a reason. Trust that. And trust yourself." A sharp knock at the door made them both jump. "Miss Kira," came Commander Ryland's gravelly voice. "His Majesty requests your presence in the grand dining hall." Kira's stomach clenched. This was it. The moment where she either convinced the most powerful alphas in the realm that she belonged, or she failed spectacularly and doomed them both. "You've got this," Alara murmured, squeezing her hand once before opening the door. Commander Ryland waited in the corridor, his expression unreadable, but when his gaze swept over Kira, something flickered in those cold gray eyes. Approval, perhaps, or at least acknowledgement that Madame Thorne had worked a miracle. "This way," he said, turning without further comment. The walk through Blackridge's corridors felt endless. Unlike Silver Pine's warm, welcoming halls, everything here was designed to intimidate. Dark stone walls, lined with weapons from a dozen different wars, tapestries depicting brutal battles, and mounted heads of creatures Kira hoped were mythological. They descended a grand staircase that spiraled down through the heart of the fortress, and with each step, Kira could hear voices growing louder. Male voices, rough with dominance and age, punctuated by occasional laughter that sounded more like growls. Commander Ryland stopped before a set of massive doors carved with scenes of wolves bringing down prey. "A word of advice, Miss Kira," he said quietly, surprising her. "The alphas inside will test you. It's what they do. They push, they prod, they look for weaknesses. Don't show them fear. And whatever you do, don't look to His Majesty for rescue. Queens don't need rescuing." Before she could respond, he pushed open the doors. The grand dining hall was everything its name suggested, a cavernous space with vaulted ceilings held up by columns carved to look like ancient trees. A table of dark wood stretched down the center, long enough to seat 50 but currently set for only 7. 6 males stood near the fireplace at the far end, goblets of wine in their hands, deep in conversation. They all turned as one when the doors opened, their eyes locking onto Kira with predatory focus. But it was the 7th male who stole her breath. Theron stood slightly apart from the others, dressed in black formal attire that made him look like a prince from a dark fairy tale. His hair was pulled back, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face and that scar cutting through his eyebrow. When his golden eyes met hers across the hall, something electric passed between them. A jolt of recognition, of challenge, of claim. He moved toward her with fluid grace, and the other alphas fell silent, watching. Kira. Her name on his lips was both caress and command. He offered his arm, and when she took it, his warmth bled through the fabric of his sleeve. "You look beautiful." The compliment sounded genuine enough that Kira almost forgot it was part of the act. "Thank you," she murmured, allowing him to lead her toward the waiting alphas. Up close, they were even more intimidating than she'd imagined. Each one radiated the kind of power that came from decades of ruling, of conquering, of dominating. They were older than Theron, late 40s to early 60s, but age had only sharpened them, turning them into weapons honed by time. "Gentlemen," Theron said, his tone brooking no argument, "may I present Kira, my mate?" The word mate hung in the air like a thrown gauntlet. The tallest of the alphas stepped forward, a mountain of a male with a thick beard gone gray and eyes like chips of ice. Alpha Gregor of the Frostbane pack. He introduced himself, his voice a rumble of distant thunder. "Forgive my bluntness, your majesty, but we were given to understand you had no interest in taking a mate. This is sudden. The moon goddess works on her own timeline, not ours," Theron replied smoothly. "When I attended the Silverpine ceremony, I had no expectations, but when I saw Kira..." He turned those molten gold eyes to her, and the intensity in them made her heart stutter. There was no question, no doubt. "She is mine." The possessiveness in his tone was so convincing that Kira almost believed it herself. Another alpha, lean and fox-faced with auburn hair, circled them slowly, his nostrils flaring. "Curious," he murmured. "I'm Alpha Silas of the Redwood Territory. Tell me, Lady Kira, do you feel the mate bond? That undeniable pull toward your destined one?" It was a trap. Because Kira had no scent, no wolf presence strong enough to fake a mate bond. If she claimed to feel it, they might test her in ways that would expose the lie, but if she admitted she felt nothing. "What I feel," Kira said carefully, meeting Silas's sharp gaze, "is that the moon goddess's gifts manifest differently in each wolf. Some experience the bond as fire, others as a quiet certainty. Mine is..." She paused, then smiled slightly. "Private. Between my mate and myself." Silas's eyes narrowed, but before he could press further, a third alpha laughed, a booming sound that echoed off the stone walls. "Well said, girl. I like her already." This one was shorter but built like a battering ram, with scars crisscrossing his bare arms. Alpha Darius of the Iron Peak clans. "I appreciate a she-wolf who doesn't spill her secrets to strangers." "Indeed," came a silky voice from the shadows. A fourth alpha emerged, tall and elegant, with silver-streaked black hair and eyes that gleamed with cunning. "Those secrets can be dangerous things, Lady Kira, especially in a court as complex as Blackridge. I'm Alpha Lucian of the Shadowvale pack. I do hope you'll find our company more welcoming than my colleague's interrogation." Something about the way he said it made Kira's instincts scream danger. Lucian was the snake in the grass, the one who smiled while planning your destruction. "I appreciate your concern," Kira said, "but I didn't come here expecting things to be easy." "Wise," murmured the fifth alpha, an older male with kind eyes and laugh lines that suggested he smiled more than he snarled. "Alpha Brennan of the Meadowbrook Territory. It's a pleasure to meet you, Lady Kira. Your pack, Silverpine, they're known for producing excellent hunters, are they not?" Kira's throat tightened. Of course they would ask about her pack, her lineage, her credentials. "They are," she said, "though I'm afraid I never quite lived up to that reputation. I was always more interested in books than tracking prey. It was dangerous, admitting weakness, but claiming skills she didn't possess would be more dangerous still." "A scholar queen," Alpha Brennan said, his smile widening. "How refreshing. Perhaps you'll finally convince His Majesty to spend less time training with swords and more time in the library." Brennan speaks for himself. The sixth and final alpha cut in a hulking male with a face like weathered stone and eyes that held no warmth whatsoever. "Alpha Gareth of the Stormridge pack. I prefer a queen who can fight beside her king, not hide behind dusty books. Theron's arm tensed beneath Kira's hand, and when he spoke, his voice carried a warning edge. My mate's preferences are her own, Gareth. Just as your opinions on what makes a suitable queen are yours to keep silent. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Gareth's jaw tightened, but he dipped his head in acknowledgement, though his eyes promised this conversation wasn't over. Shall we dine? Theron suggested, though it wasn't really a suggestion. The seating arrangement had clearly been designed to test Kira. Theron sat at the head of the table with Kira on his right, the queen's position, but directly across from her sat Alpha Lucian, his smile never quite reaching his eyes, and beside him was Silas, still watching her with fox-sharp attention. As servants brought course after course, roasted venison, herb-crusted salmon, vegetables that sparkled with butter and spices, the conversation flowed around topics of politics, territory disputes, and pack alliances. Kira ate carefully, remembering Alara's quick lessons in court etiquette, and mostly stayed silent. But she listened. She listened to the way Alpha Gregor spoke about the eastern border troubles with the wildlands. She noticed how Alpha Lucian's smile sharpened whenever someone mentioned the council's authority. She caught the way Alpha Gareth's gaze kept drifting to Theron with something that looked almost like resentment. These weren't just advisors. They were rivals barely held in check by Theron's power. Tell me, Lady Kira, Alpha Silas said during a lull in conversation. What do you think of your new home? Blackridge is quite different from Silverpine, I imagine. Every eye turned to her. This was another test, see if she could hold her own in political discourse, or if she'd crumble under scrutiny. Kira set down her fork with deliberate precision. It's certainly more imposing, she said. Silverpine was built to welcome. Blackridge was built to warn. But I'm beginning to think that's not a weakness, it's honesty. This castle doesn't pretend to be something it's not. She met Silas's gaze steadily. I appreciate that. Pretense has always seemed exhausting to me. The irony of those words spoken while engaged in the greatest pretense of her life wasn't lost on her, but judging by the slight twitch of Theron's lips, he'd caught it too. Interesting perspective. Alpha Lucian murmured. Though some might argue that a certain amount of flexibility is necessary in leadership, the ability to present different faces to different audiences. Some might, Kira agreed. But I've found that wolves respect strength more than charm, and there's a particular kind of strength in refusing to be anything other than what you are. Even if what you are is unpopular? Lucian pressed. Especially then. Silence fell over the table. Kira's heart hammered against her ribs, wondering if she'd gone too far, been too bold. Exposed herself as someone who had no business speaking to alphas this way. Then Alpha Darius laughed, that same booming sound from before. By the goddess Theron, she's got fire in her. I was worried you'd chosen some simpering little thing, but this one has teeth. She does, Theron agreed. And when Kira glanced at him, there was something almost like pride in his expression, which is one of many reasons I chose her. The conversation moved on, but Kira felt the shift in the room. She'd passed some invisible test, not with all of them, certainly. Lucian still watched her like a snake studying a mouse, and Gareth's disapproval hadn't diminished, but she'd proven she wasn't completely helpless. It was a start. As dessert was served, a delicate pastry filled with honey and nuts, Alpha Gregor cleared his throat. Your Majesty, we should discuss tomorrow's summit. Several of the attending alphas have already sent word that they're surprised by your sudden announcement of a mate. They're requesting a formal presentation. Theron's expression didn't change, but Kira felt him tense. A formal presentation? A demonstration of the mate bond, Alpha Silas clarified, his smile sharp. To satisfy any questions about its authenticity. Kira's blood ran cold. A demonstration? How were they supposed to demonstrate something that didn't exist? That seems unnecessary, Theron said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. My word should be sufficient. In ordinary circumstances, absolutely. Alpha Lucian agreed smoothly. But you've spent a decade refusing to take a mate. Forgive the other alphas. Their skepticism. They simply want to ensure this isn't a political maneuver designed to circumvent the council's law. Which was, of course, exactly what it was. Kira's mind raced. They were trapped. If Theron refused the demonstration, it would confirm the Alpha's suspicions. But if they agreed, what kind of demonstration? Kira heard herself ask. All eyes turned to her, surprise evident on several faces that she'd spoken up. Alpha Gregor shifted uncomfortably. There are traditional tests. A mated pair should be able to sense each other's emotions, finish each other's thoughts, demonstrate a physical connection that goes beyond ordinary attraction. In other words, Kira said quietly, you want proof that our bond is blessed by the moon goddess herself. Precisely. Kira looked at Theron, saw the storm brewing in those golden eyes. He was calculating, trying to find a way out of this trap, but there wasn't one. They both knew it. So Kira did the only thing she could. She reached across the small space between their chairs and laced her fingers through his. The contact sent electricity racing up her arm, the same jolt she'd felt when he first touched her. Theron's eyes widened slightly, and she felt his surprise through that point of connection. Then we'll give you your demonstration, Kira said, squeezing his hand. Tomorrow, at the summit. Let every Alpha in the Northern Territories see that the moon goddess's blessings rest on us both. She smiled, channeling every ounce of confidence she didn't feel. After all, what do we have to hide? Everything, her mind screamed. Absolutely everything. But the Alphas didn't need to know that. As the dinner concluded and the inner council filed out with various promises to see them tomorrow, Theron kept hold of Kira's hand. When the last Alpha had left, and they were finally alone, he turned to her. That was either very brave or very foolish, he said quietly. Probably both, Kira admitted. But what choice did we have? Theron studied her for a long moment, and she saw something shift in his expression. Respect, perhaps, or recognition. Tomorrow's demonstration will be difficult, he said. They'll push us, test us in ways designed to expose any deception. Then we don't give them anything to find. Kira lifted her chin. Teach me. Whatever I need to know. Whatever I need to do to convince them, teach me. A slow smile curved Theron's lips, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. Very well, little wolf. Your lessons begin now. Chapter 5. Lessons in Deception. Theron led Kira through corridors she hadn't yet explored, deeper into the heart of Blackridge. They passed fewer guards here, fewer servants. This was the private wing, she realized, where the king kept his personal chambers. He stopped before a door of dark wood, carved with phases of the moon, and pushed it open without ceremony. The room beyond was nothing like she'd expected. Instead of cold stone and weapons, Theron's private study was warm leather chairs positioned before a roaring fireplace, shelves lined with books that actually looked read rather than decorative, and a massive desk covered in maps and correspondence. One entire wall was devoted to windows overlooking the mountains, currently reflecting the moonlight like liquid silver. Sit, Theron said, gesturing to one of the chairs. Kira sank into the leather, acutely aware that she was alone with the Alpha King in his most private space. That this intimacy false, though it was crossed lines she'd never imagined crossing. Theron poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter and handed her one. Whiskey. You'll need it. Whiskey. She took a tentative sip and immediately coughed as fire burned down her throat. Theron's lips twitched with amusement as he settled into the chair across from her. Tomorrow's demonstration will focus on 3 key elements, he began without preamble. Emotional resonance, physical synchronicity, and the ability to present a unified front. The Alphas will be watching for any hesitation, any discord, any sign that our bond is fabricated. So we need to act like we're... Kira trailed off, unsure how to finish. In love? Theron's smile was bitter. No. Love takes time, and we've known each other less than a day. But we need to demonstrate that undeniable pull of a mate bond, that sense that we were made for each other, that being apart would be unthinkable. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his golden eyes intense. Tell me about yourself, your real self, not the version your pack saw. What do you love? What terrifies you? What makes you angry? The questions caught Kira off guard. Why does that matter? Because mates know each other. If someone asks you what my favorite food is, you should be able to answer without hesitation. If they ask what comforts you when you're sad, I need to know. He took a long drink of his whiskey. We're going to spend the next few hours learning everything we can about each other. It made sense. Of course it did. But the idea of opening herself up to this dangerous, powerful male made Kira's instincts scream warnings. Still, she'd agreed to this charade. I love books, she said quietly. Old ones, with pages that smell like dust and secrets. I used to sneak into the pack library at night when no one was watching and read until dawn. History, mythology, poetry, anything that let me disappear into another world. Theron nodded. What else? I love thunderstorms. The way the air feels electric right before the rain comes. And I love the forest at twilight, when everything is caught between light and dark. She paused, then added, I'm terrified of being invisible, of living my entire life without anyone really seeing me. Something flickered across Theron's face, understanding, maybe, or recognition. I see you, he said quietly, for what it's worth. The words shouldn't have affected her. This was an act, a business arrangement, nothing more. But Kira's throat tightened anyway. What about you? She asked, deflecting. What does the terrifying Alpha King love? Theron was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, silence. Real silence. Not the kind that comes from wolves being too afraid to speak. The kind you find on the mountain peaks before dawn, when it feels like you're the only creature alive. He stared into his glass, and for the first time, Kira saw past the armor to the lonely male beneath. I love the moment right before a storm breaks, not the storm itself, but that anticipation. And I love, he hesitated. I loved her laugh. My first queen. Elena. She had this laugh that sounded like wind chimes, and when she laughed, the entire fortress felt less like a prison. The grief in his voice was so raw it hurt to hear. What happened to her? Kira asked softly. Theron's jaw clenched. She was assassinated, poisoned by wolves who thought a weak king would be easier to control than a strong one. His eyes met Kira's, and they were full of ghosts. They were wrong. After she died, I became the monster they feared I'd be, and I've spent 10 years making sure no one ever gets close enough to hurt me like that again. Understanding crashed over Kira like a wave. That's why you don't want a real mate. Why you chose this charade instead. Love is a weakness I can't afford, Theron said flatly. It makes you vulnerable. It gives your enemies a target. And when they take that target away, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I'm sorry, Kira whispered. For your loss. For what they did to you. Theron shook his head. Don't be. I made my choices. I knew what I was trading when I agreed to sit on this throne. He finished his whiskey in one swallow. Now, physical synchronicity. Tomorrow, we'll need to demonstrate that we're comfortable touching each other, that there's a natural chemistry between us. The shift back to business was jarring, but Kira understood the necessity. Grief was a luxury they couldn't afford right now. I'm not good at. She gestured vaguely. Physical affection. I've never had anyone who wanted to touch me. Then we practice. Theron stood and extended his hand. Come here. Kira rose on shaky legs and placed her hand in his. He pulled her closer, not quite into his arms, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell that intoxicating scent of pine and smoke. Mates gravitate toward each other, Theron said, his voice lower now, intimate. They touch without thinking, a hand on the small of the back, fingers tracing a wrist, bodies angling toward each other even in crowded rooms. He demonstrated, his hand settling on her waist with surprising gentleness. When we walk tomorrow, you'll lean into me slightly, like this. He guided her closer, and Kira's breath hitched as her shoulder pressed against his chest. And I'll do this. His thumb traced small circles on her hip. The gesture both possessive and protective. Every point of contact between them felt electrified. Kira's heart raced, and she knew he could hear it, knew he could sense her body's betraying response to his nearness. Your scent, Theron murmured, surprising her. Or lack thereof. The other alphas will notice that you don't carry the usual pheromone markers of a mated female. Kira's stomach sank. I can't fix that. I was born without. I know. His hand moved from her waist to cup her face, tilting it up so she met his eyes. But there's a solution. If you'll permit it. What solution? Instead of answering, Theron leaned down and pressed his face against the curve of her neck, right where her pulse hammered wildly. Kira froze, every muscle locked tight, as she felt his breath ghost across her skin. If I scent mark you, he said against her throat, his voice vibrating through her. You'll carry my scent. It won't give you a pheromone signature of your own, but it will tell every wolf in the Northern Territories that you belong to me. That you're under my protection. My claim. The word claim sent shivers racing down Kira's spine. How do you? She couldn't finish the question, her voice failing. I'd need to mark the traditional places, neck, wrists, anywhere wolves check for mate bonds. His nose traced up the column of her throat, and Kira's knees nearly buckled. It's not permanent. The scent would fade after a few weeks without renewal. But for tomorrow's demonstration, it would be convincing. Kira's mind struggled to function through the haze of sensation. This was practical, necessary even. Just another layer to their deception. So why did it feel like so much more? Do it, she whispered. Theron pulled back slightly, searching her face. Are you certain? This is intimate, Kira. Once I mark you, every wolf will know you're mine. There's no taking it back. I'm certain. For a long moment, Theron just looked at her, something unreadable in his golden eyes. Then, he leaned back in, and this time, his lips brushed against her neck as he scent-marked her, not quite a kiss, but close enough that Kira couldn't tell the difference. He moved with deliberate care, marking her throat, the hollow behind her ear, the inside of her wrists. Each touch was gentle, almost reverent, and Kira found herself swaying toward him, her body responding to his in ways she'd never experienced. When he finally stepped back, his breathing was slightly uneven, his eyes darker than before. There, he said, his voice rough. Now you smell like mine. Kira touched her neck, feeling the warmth where his mouth had been. Will it be enough? It will have to be. Theron moved to the window, putting distance between them as if he needed the space to think. Tomorrow, the summit begins at noon. The formal presentation will be in the evening, in the Great Hall before all assembled alphas. We'll be expected to demonstrate our bond through a series of traditional tests. What kind of tests? The Council of Elders typically uses 3. Theron said, his back still to her. The first is the recognition will be separated and asked questions about each other that only true mates would know. The second is the resonance we'll need to demonstrate emotional connection, usually through some kind of shared experience or challenge. And the third, he paused, tension visible in the line of his shoulders, is the kiss of binding. Kira's mouth went dry. Which is a public kiss that, according to tradition, should be so powerful it makes the moon goddess herself take notice. He finally turned to face her, and his expression was apologetic. It's archaic and invasive, but the council considers it the ultimate test of a true mate bond. If there's no genuine connection between the pair, the kiss will feel hollow, performative. But if the bond is real, the witnesses will feel it, Kira finished quietly. The power of it. Exactly. They stared at each other across the study, and Kira wondered if Theron felt the same creeping dread she did. Because they could learn facts about each other, could practice touching until it looked natural. But how did you fake the kind of kiss that was supposed to move the gods? We'll practice, Theron said, as if reading her thoughts. Not tonight, we're both exhausted, and forced intimacy never looks genuine. But tomorrow morning, before the summit begins, we'll rehearse. The idea of kissing Theron as practice, as preparation for a public performance, should have felt clinical, businesslike. Instead, it made Kira's pulse race with something that felt dangerously like anticipation. I should let you rest, Theron said, moving toward the door. Alara will escort you back to your chambers. Tomorrow will be difficult. Sleep if you can. Kira nodded, following him to the door, but as she stepped into the corridor where Alara waited, she turned back. Theron? He paused, one hand on the doorframe. Yes? Thank you. For trusting me with the truth about Elena. About why you're doing this. She met his gaze steadily. I won't let you down. Something softened in his expression. something that looked almost like hope. "I know," he said quietly. "That's why I chose you. Subscribe if you think Kira deserves someone who sees her worth instead of using her as a shield. Drop a comment if you've ever had to pretend to be something you're not, just to survive." Tell Kira she's not alone in this. The walk back to her chambers felt surreal. Kira could still feel the phantom warmth of Theron's touch on her skin, could still smell his scent clinging to her like a second skin. "How did it go?" Alara asked softly as they climbed the tower stairs. "I don't know," Kira admitted. "He told me about his first queen, about why he's so determined never to love again." Alara's expression turned sad. "Queen Elena was wonderful. Kind, intelligent, strong. When she died, something in His Majesty died too. We all felt it the way the warmth just left him. And now he's pretending to have found that again," Kira said. "With me, a stranger. Maybe that's easier," Alara suggested. "Pretending with someone who doesn't remind him of what he lost. Someone who isn't trying to replace her." They reached the Queen's quarters, and Alara helped Kira out of the elaborate gown and into a sleeping shift of soft cotton. "Try to sleep," Alara said. "Tomorrow, all of the northern territories will be watching you. You'll need your strength." But long after Alara left, Kira lay awake in the massive bed, staring at the ceiling and wondering how she'd ended up here in a castle full of predators, pretending to be the mate of a king who'd built walls so high around his heart that even the moon goddess couldn't scale them. Outside her window, thunder rumbled in the distance. The storm Theron had sensed earlier was finally breaking, and as lightning split the sky, Kira made a decision. Tomorrow, she would be the queen Theron needed. She would play her role so perfectly that not even the sharpest alpha would see through the deception. But somewhere in the darkest corner of her heart, a dangerous question whispered. What if pretending to love the Alpha King was the easy part? What if the real danger was discovering that her feelings weren't pretend at all? Chapter 6. The Summit Begins. Kira woke to thunder, shaking the windows and rain lashing against the glass like claws. The storm had arrived in full force, turning the sky dark as twilight, even though dawn had barely broken. She lay in the massive bed, listening to the fury of the weather, and tried to calm the panic rising in her chest. Today, the summit began today. In a few hours, she'd be standing before the most powerful alphas in the realm, pretending to be something she wasn't. A knock at the door made her jump. "Come in," she called, pulling the blankets up to her chin. Alara entered with a breakfast tray, but she wasn't alone. Behind her came Madame Thorne, her arms loaded with garment bags, and two other women Kira didn't recognize, one carrying a case of cosmetics, the other balancing an ornate wooden box. "Good morning, my lady," Alara said, with false cheerfulness that told Kira she wasn't the only one anxious about today. "We have approximately 3 hours to transform you into a queen worthy of the summit presentation." Kira's stomach churned. 3 hours? Every minute counts, Madame Thorne announced, already unpacking gowns with military efficiency. "Eat quickly, we have much work to do." The next hours passed in a whirlwind of organized chaos. Kira was bathed in water infused with oils that made her skin shimmer. Her hair was washed with something that smelled of jasmine and moonflower, then dried and arranged into an elaborate style that involved braids, pins, and what felt like architectural engineering. The woman with the cosmetics case, introduced as Mistress Vera, painted Kira's face with such precision it felt like watching an artist work. Subtle colors that enhanced rather than masked, making her eyes look larger, her lips fuller, her cheekbones more pronounced. "You have good bone structure," Vera murmured, stepping back to assess her work. "Classic features. The key is not to overpower them." Finally, Madame Thorne presented the gown. It was breathtaking, a creation of midnight blue silk that seemed to capture starlight in its folds. The bodice was fitted, embroidered with silver thread in patterns that resembled constellations, while the skirt flowed like water. But it was the back that made Kira's breath catch, a deep V that exposed her spine, making her feel simultaneously powerful and vulnerable. "This is too much," Kira whispered as they helped her into it. "I'm not. You are the Alpha King's mate." Madame Thorne cut her off, her tone brooking no argument. "You are enough. Now stand still while I adjust these sleeves." When they finally allowed her to look in the mirror, Kira barely recognized herself. The woman staring back looked regal, confident, like someone who belonged beside a king. The circlet from last night had been replaced with something more elaborate, a crown of silver that caught the light with every movement, making it look like she wore moonbeams. "Perfect," Alara breathed. "You look like a queen from legend." Another knock at the door, this one sharp and commanding. Commander Ryland's voice carried through. "Lady Kira, His Majesty requests your presence in the throne room. The alphas are beginning to arrive." Kira's heart kicked into overdrive. This was it. No more preparation, no more practice. Time to face the wolves. Alara squeezed her hand. "Remember, you belong here. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." The walk through the castle revealed how thoroughly the summit had transformed Blackridge. Everywhere Kira looked, wolves in formal attire moved through the corridors, alphas from every territory in the realm, their mates and heirs, advisors and warriors. The air thrummed with combined power, so thick it felt like wading through water. Every single one of them stopped to stare as she passed. Some gazes held curiosity, others skepticism, still others something darker, jealousy, perhaps, or calculation. Kira kept her chin up, her expression serene, even as her hands trembled in the folds of her gown. Commander Ryland led her to a set of towering doors carved with wolves and crowned heads, the entrance to the throne room. 2 guards pulled them open, and Kira stepped into controlled chaos. The throne room was massive, easily twice the size of the grand dining hall. Columns marched down either side, each one carved to look like ancient trees with branches spreading across the vaulted ceiling. At the far end, elevated on a dais of black stone, sat 2 thrones. One was massive, hewn from what looked like a single piece of obsidian, with armrests carved into snarling wolf heads. The other, the queen's throne, was slightly smaller but no less impressive, made of silver-veined marble that seemed to glow with inner light. And standing before those thrones, deep in conversation with Alpha Gregor and several other wolves, was Theron. He wore formal regalia, black leather and silk, with the black fang crest emblazoned in silver across his chest. A crown rested on his dark hair, simpler than hers but radiating authority. At his hip hung that same runed sword from the mating ceremony. When the doors opened, conversation died. Every head turned toward Kira, but it was Theron's reaction that stole her breath. His golden eyes locked onto her, and for just a moment, his careful mask slipped. What she saw beneath made her heart stutter raw appreciation, fierce possessiveness, and something that looked dangerously close to genuine desire. Then the mask was back in place, but not before several of the watching alphas had caught that unguarded moment. Kira heard murmurs ripple through the crowd, saw knowing smiles on a few faces. Good, she thought. Let them think he's genuinely attracted to me. Let them believe. Theron moved toward her with that predatory grace, and the crowd parted before him. When he reached her, he didn't speak. He simply took her hand, lifted it to his lips, and pressed a kiss to her knuckles that felt like a brand. "You look magnificent," he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. "Like a queen from the old stories. You don't look so bad yourself," Kira managed, proud that her voice didn't shake. His lips curved into a small smile. "Come. There are several dozen alphas waiting to meet you, and most of them are hoping to find proof that you're a fraud. Then, let's disappoint them," Kira said, and was rewarded with a flash of approval in those golden eyes. The next hour was a blur of introductions, alphas from territories she'd never heard of, each one studying her with varying degrees of skepticism. Their mates, some welcoming, and others openly hostile, heirs who looked at her with calculation, wondering how her presence affected the line of succession. Through it all, Theron remained at her side, his hand at the small of her back or wrapped around hers, a constant anchor. And Kira found herself falling into the role more easily than she'd expected, asking polite questions about their territories, complimenting their attire, deflecting invasive inquiries with diplomatic grace that surprised even herself. "You're a natural," Theron murmured, during a brief respite between introductions. "Have you done this before?" "I've spent my whole life watching people and learning how to navigate around them without being noticed," Kira admitted. "Turns out those skills translate well to court politics. Invisibility as training for queenship," Theron mused. "Who would have thought?" Before Kira could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. The crowd parted, and through it strode a female who made every other she-wolf in the room look plain by comparison. She was tall, nearly Theron's height, with hair like liquid gold that fell in perfect waves to her waist. Her gown was crimson silk that clung to curves that seemed mathematically perfect, but it was her eyes that captured attention. Violet, so startling and unusual that they had to be a rare genetic gift, and those violet eyes were fixed on Theron with naked hunger. "Theron, darling," she purred, her voice like honey and poison mixed. "You've been hiding from me." Kira felt Theron tense beside her, his hand tightening on her waist. "Seraphina," he said, his tone perfectly neutral. "I didn't realize your pack was attending the summit." "Oh, we wouldn't miss it for the world. Not when there are such interesting developments to witness." Seraphina's gaze finally slid to Kira, and the dismissal in it was palpable. "So this is your mate? How unexpected." The insult was clear, even wrapped in politeness. Kira felt her wolf, that weak, barely there presence, stir for the first time in her life, responding to the challenge with something that felt almost like a growl. "Lady Seraphina," Kira said, her voice cool. "How lovely to meet another member of the court. Theron has told me so much about the various alphas and their families." It was a lie. He'd told her almost nothing about Seraphina specifically, but the implication that they'd spent intimate time discussing the other wolves was clear. Seraphina's smile sharpened. "I'm sure he has, though I wonder if he mentioned that we were once very close." She stepped closer to Theron, invading his space, with the confidence of someone who'd been welcomed there before he became so devoted to his solitude. "Ancient history," Theron said, but there was an edge to his voice that told Kira this female was more than just a political complication. "Is it?" Seraphina's fingers traced up his arm in a gesture so familiar it made Kira's stomach clench. "Because I remember a time when you couldn't imagine your life without." "Seraphina," Theron's voice dropped to that dangerous register that made lesser wolves cower. "You're addressing my mate. Show respect, or leave." For a moment, something vicious flashed across Seraphina's beautiful face. Then she laughed, a tinkling sound that set Kira's teeth on edge. "Of course, Your Majesty. My apologies." She turned that violet gaze back to Kira. "I do hope you're prepared for tonight's presentation, little wolf. The tests can be so revealing. It would be tragic if you weren't everything you claim to be." The threat was unmistakable. Before Kira could formulate a response, trumpets sounded throughout the throne room, the signal that the formal summit was about to begin. "Saved by the bell," Seraphina murmured. "Until tonight, then." She swept away in a rustle of crimson silk, leaving tension thick enough to choke on in her wake. "Who is she?" Kira asked quietly, as wolves began filing toward their assigned seats. Theron's jaw was tight. "Alpha Cassius's daughter, and someone I had a brief involvement with years ago. Before Elena. She doesn't seem to think it's over." "It's been over for a decade," Theron said firmly. "She just doesn't like losing to anyone, especially not to someone she considers beneath her." The dismissal should have stung, but Kira was too focused on the bigger problem. Seraphina clearly knew Theron well, intimately, probably, which meant she might be able to spot inconsistencies in their performance that others would miss. "She's going to be a problem," Kira said. "Then we'll handle her," Theron replied, guiding her toward the dais. Together, as they took their seats on the twin thrones, Kira's first time sitting in the queen's chair, which felt both terrifying and strangely right, she surveyed the assembled alphas. Hundreds of them, all powerful, all watching, all waiting for her to fail. And standing in the front row, violet eyes gleaming with malicious anticipation, was Seraphina. The council of elders emerged from a side entrance, 5 ancient wolves, so old their hair had gone white as snow, their eyes milky with age but still sharp with cunning. They moved with painful slowness to stand before the thrones. The eldest, a male so bent with age he was nearly folded in half, raised his staff and struck it against the stone floor 3 times. "Let the summit of crowns begin," he announced, his voice surprisingly strong. "And let the testing of bonds commence." Kira's heart hammered against her ribs as the first test was explained. The recognition. She and Theron would be separated, questioned by different elders about intimate details of each other's lives, preferences, histories, details they'd spent only one night learning. An elder approached the dais, a female with shrewd eyes and a smile that held no warmth. "Lady Kira," she said, "if you would come with me, His Majesty will remain here with Elder Morthen." This was it. The first real test of their deception. Theron caught her hand as she rose, pulling her close enough to whisper in her ear, "Remember, we know each other. Trust what we shared last night. Trust yourself." Then he released her, and Kira followed the elder toward a private chamber, while the assembled alphas watched with hungry eyes. As the door closed behind her, sealing her in with the elder and her questions, Kira sent up a silent prayer to the moon goddess. "Please, please let me be enough. For him, for this, for whatever comes next." Because failure meant more than just her freedom now. Failure meant Theron would lose his throne. And somehow, in just 2 days, that possibility had become more terrifying than any fate she could imagine for herself. Chapter 7. The Tests of Truth. The private chamber was small and windowless, lit only by a circle of candles that cast dancing shadows on the stone walls. A single chair sat in the center, and the elder gestured to it with gnarled fingers. "Sit, child." Kira obeyed, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. The elder circled her slowly, like a vulture assessing prey. "I am Elder Cassandra," the old female said. "I have witnessed 300 mate bonds in my lifetime. I know the truth when I see it, and I know deception even better." Her milky eyes fixed on Kira with unnerving precision. "So let us begin. Tell me, Lady Kira, when did you first meet His Majesty?" The questions came rapid fire after that, each one designed to trip her up, to expose inconsistencies. "What does he drink in the morning?" "Whiskey," Kira answered, remembering last night. "Or black coffee when he needs to be sharp for meetings." "What makes him laugh?" Kira paused. Theron hadn't laughed in her presence, not truly, but she remembered what he'd said about Elena. Unexpected kindness. When someone shows courage when they think no one's watching, it surprises him into genuine joy. Elder Cassandra's eyebrow raised slightly. "Specific. Good. What is his greatest fear?" This one she knew without hesitation. Loving someone and losing them again. He's terrified of the vulnerability that comes with caring. "What side of the bed does he sleep on?" Kira's mind raced. She'd never been in his bedroom, had no way of knowing. Wait. The study. When they'd stood by the fireplace, he'd positioned himself to her right. Always to her right, as if it was instinct. "The right side," she said. "He always positions himself to protect the left, the heart side." The elder's expression gave nothing away. "How does he take his meat?" "Rare, almost raw." Kira remembered the dinner. The way he'd barely touched the more cooked portions. "Like the wolf he is." "What does he smell like?" "Pine and smoke and winter air, like the mountain itself," claimed him. "And what does he call you when you're alone?" Kira's breath caught. This was a trap. Theron had only called her by name, nothing intimate, nothing personal. But a true mate would have pet names, terms of endearment. "Little wolf," she said softly, remembering how he'd said it last night. "Very well, little wolf. Your lessons begin now." "He calls me little wolf when he thinks I'm being brave despite my fear." Elder Cassandra stopped circling. For a long moment, she simply stared at Kira, her ancient eyes searching for something. Then she nodded once, sharp, decisive. "We shall see if His Majesty's answers match yours. Wait here." The elder swept from the room, leaving Kira alone with her racing heart and the terrible certainty that she'd failed somehow, exposed some flaw in their deception. In the throne room, Theron faced Elder Morthen, a male nearly as old as the stones themselves, with eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of dynasties. "Your Majesty," Morthen began, his voice like gravel. "You have spent a decade refusing every potential mate, yet you return from a routine mating ceremony with this female unknown, unremarkable by all accounts, and declare her your destined one. Forgive an old wolf's skepticism." "There's nothing to forgive," Theron said smoothly. "Skepticism is healthy. Ask your questions, Elder. I have nothing to hide." "Very well. When did you first notice Lady Kira?" Theron remembered the moment with crystalline clarity. Kira pressed against the wall of the grand hall, making herself invisible, while her family paraded around her like peacocks. The moment I entered the Silver Pine ceremony. She was hiding in the shadows, wearing a gray dress that was designed to make her disappear. But I saw her anyway. She had this look on her face, longing mixed with resignation, like she wanted something desperately but had accepted she'd never have it. His voice dropped. I recognized that look because I see it in the mirror every morning. Elder Morthen's expression flickered with something that might have been surprise. What does she fear most? Being invisible. Living her entire life without anyone truly seeing her for who she is. Theron met the elder's gaze steadily. So I made sure she knew I saw her. All of her. What is her favorite time of day? Twilight, when the world is caught between light and dark, and everything feels possible. What does she smell like? Theron's jaw tightened. This was the dangerous question because Kira didn't smell like anything, didn't carry a scent that other wolves could detect. But he'd marked her last night. Now she carried his scent. She smells like mine, he said simply. Pine and smoke because I've claimed her. But underneath, there's something else, something subtle. Books and thunderstorms and potential. Poetic, Morthen observed dryly. Tell me, Your Majesty, what does she see in you? A wolf who rules through fear, who has shut himself away from his people for a decade. What would make a young female want to bind herself to such a king? It was a loaded question, designed to expose any hint that this was a political arrangement rather than a genuine bond. Theron was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, there was raw honesty in his voice. She sees the male I was before grief turned me into a monster. She sees potential for something other than loneliness. He paused. And maybe she recognizes that we're the same. Two wolves who've spent our lives being overlooked, dismissed, underestimated. We understand each other's isolation because we've both lived it. Elder Morthen studied him with those ancient, knowing eyes. One final question, Your Majesty. If the moon goddess herself appeared and told you that Lady Kira was not your true mate, that your destined one still waited elsewhere, would you let her go? It was the cruelest question possible. Because the truthful answer, yes. Because this is all fake anyway, would expose everything. But Theron thought of Kira's courage last night, agreeing to this insane deception. Her quick wit at dinner, holding her own against alphas, who'd spent lifetimes in political warfare. The way she'd looked at him when he confessed his fears, with understanding rather than pity. No, he said, and was surprised to realize he meant it. I wouldn't, because the moon goddess gave me a gift once before, and I failed to protect it. I won't make that mistake twice. Something shifted in Elder Morthen's expression, respect, perhaps, or recognition of truth. We shall see if Lady Kira's answers align with yours, he said. Return to your throne, Your Majesty. The recognition continues. When Kira was finally allowed to leave the chamber, her legs felt like water. She'd answered dozens more questions, some about herself, others about Theron, still others designed to trick her into contradicting herself. Alara waited outside, her face anxious. How did it go? I have no idea, Kira admitted. Either I convinced her, or I just destroyed everything. They returned to the throne room to find the assembled alphas murmuring amongst themselves, clearly discussing what they'd witnessed. Theron sat on his throne, looking perfectly composed, but when his eyes met Kira's across the room, she saw the question there. Did we pass? She gave the tiniest shrug. I don't know. The 5 elders convened in the center of the room, their heads bent together in whispered consultation. The wait felt eternal. Finally, Elder Cassandra stepped forward. The recognition test has been completed, she announced, her voice carrying through the vast chamber. We asked His Majesty and Lady Kira 20 questions, each 10 about themselves, 10 about each other. Questions designed to expose any deception or lack of genuine intimacy. The room held its collective breath. Of the 40 total questions, Elder Cassandra continued, there were 0 contradictions. Every answer aligned, every detail matched. She turned her shrewd gaze to Kira. Lady Kira knew that His Majesty prefers silence before dawn, that he takes his whiskey neat, that he positions himself to protect those he cares for. She knew details that only a mate who'd spent intimate time with him would know. Kira's heart hammered. She'd guessed on half those questions, trusting instinct and the few hours they'd spent together. And His Majesty, Elder Morthen added, demonstrated equal knowledge of Lady Kira, her love of storms, her favorite time of day, her deepest fears. More importantly, his ancient eyes swept across the assembled alphas. He spoke of her with the kind of raw honesty that cannot be fabricated. This is not a political arrangement. This is recognition. Relief crashed through Kira so powerfully, she swayed on her feet. Theron was there instantly, his hand steadying her, pulling her close. "Well done, little wolf," he murmured against her ear, and the pride in his voice made something warm bloom in her chest. But Elder Cassandra wasn't finished. The recognition has been passed. However, 2 tests remain before we can confirm this bond, as blessed by the moon goddess. She gestured to the center of the room, where servants were rolling out what looked like an elaborate game board. The second test, the resonance. His Majesty and Lady Kira must demonstrate their ability to work as one, to anticipate each other's moves, to trust without words, to function as 2 halves of a whole. Kira's stomach dropped as she saw what the game board actually was. A combat arena marked with intricate symbols, surrounded by weapons of various types. "This is the trial of shadows," Elder Morthen explained, an ancient test where mated pairs must face opponents together, demonstrating perfect synchronicity. Their bond will be tested under pressure, in circumstances where failure means pain. "You're asking them to fight?" Alpha Brennan sounded shocked. "Lady Kira is clearly not a warrior. The moon goddess cares not for physical strength," Elder Cassandra interrupted. "She cares for connection, for trust, for the ability of mates to protect each other regardless of individual weakness. If their bond is true, they will find a way." Theron's hand tightened on Kira's waist. She could feel the tension radiating from him, could sense his rage at this test that would put her in danger. "I accept," she said before he could refuse on her behalf. Every head in the room turned to stare at her. "Kira," Theron began, his voice low and warning. "I accept," she repeated, louder this time, addressing the elders directly. "When do we begin?" Elder Cassandra smiled, and it was not a kind expression. "Now," comment below. What would you do in Kira's position? Tell her she's brave, or tell her she's insane for agreeing to a combat trial? The weapons surrounding the arena gleamed in the candlelight: swords, daggers, staffs, even a few exotic blades Kira had never seen before. Theron moved through them with the ease of someone who'd trained with weapons his entire life, selecting a short sword that hummed with barely contained power. Then he turned to Kira. "Can you fight at all?" "I can survive," she said, which wasn't exactly an answer. His eyes searched hers, and she saw his internal war, the part of him that wanted to refuse this test, to shield her from danger, warring with the part that knew refusal would expose their deception. "Trust me," Kira said quietly. "Please, trust that I know my own limitations and my own strengths." Something shifted in his expression. He moved to the weapons and selected a long dagger, lightweight, well-balanced, designed for speed rather than power. "Can you use this?" Kira took the blade, testing its weight. "I can try." Not good enough." Theron moved behind her, his chest against her back, his arms coming around to adjust her grip on the dagger. "Hold it like this. Point down, not up. If someone comes at you, you go for soft targets: throat, underarms, inner thighs. Don't try to overpower. Use their momentum against them." His hands guided hers through a few basic defensive moves, and Kira tried to focus on the lesson rather than the intoxicating feeling of being wrapped in his strength. "Most importantly," Theron murmured in her ear, "stay behind me. I'll handle the threats. You just need to watch my back and move when I move. Can you do that?" "Yes." The elders had finished preparing the arena. 2 wolves stepped forward, warriors from Alpha Gareth's pack, Kira realized, both massive and scarred and radiating violence barely held in check. "The rules are simple," Elder Morthen announced. "His Majesty and Lady Kira must survive 3 minutes against these opponents. They may use any weapons available and any tactics they choose, but they must fight together. Separation results in automatic failure. 3 minutes. It sounded like nothing. It sounded like forever. "And if we win?" Theron asked. Then you pass the resonance test and proceed to the final trial. Elder Cassandra's smile was sharp. Begin. The warriors attacked immediately, not giving them time to strategize. They moved with brutal efficiency, one going high while the other went low, designed to split Theron's attention. But Theron was faster. His sword met the first warrior's blade with a clang that echoed through the throne room. In the same motion, he twisted, putting himself between Kira and the second attacker, forcing the male to adjust his angle. Left, Theron barked, and Kira moved without thinking, ducking under his extended arm as he parried another strike. They fell into a rhythm, Theron attacking and defending, while Kira moved like his shadow, staying close enough that the warriors couldn't separate them, but far enough that she didn't interfere with his movements. But these weren't ordinary fighters. They were trained warriors with decades of experience, and they adapted quickly to Theron's style. One of them feinted high, then dropped low at the last second, his blade sweeping toward Kira's legs. She saw it coming barely and jumped, feeling the sword pass beneath her feet by inches. She landed off balance, stumbling, and suddenly she was separated from Theron by 3 feet that might as well have been miles. The warrior grinned, seeing his opportunity. He lunged toward Kira, his blade aimed at her shoulder, a disabling strike. Not lethal, but enough to end the test. Time seemed to slow. Kira saw Theron's face contort with rage and fear. Saw him pivot with impossible speed, abandoning his defensive position to reach her. But he was too far. He wouldn't make it in time. So Kira did the only thing she could. She stopped retreating. Instead of backing away from the oncoming blade, she stepped into the attack, inside the warrior's guard where his longer sword couldn't adjust angle. Her dagger came up not at his throat where he'd expect it, but lower, pressing against his ribs in the exact soft spot Theron had shown her. "Yield," she said, her voice surprisingly steady despite her hammering heart. "Or I press deeper." The warrior froze, his eyes wide with shock, because he could feel it, the point of her dagger right over his heart, positioned perfectly to slide between ribs if she pushed just a little harder. For a frozen moment, the entire throne room held its breath. Then the warrior stepped back, raising his hands in surrender. "Yield," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Lady Kira has bested me." Stunned silence. Then the assembled alphas erupted in shocked murmurs, and from some quarters grudging applause. The second warrior had backed away the moment his partner yielded, clearly unwilling to continue when his advantage was gone. Elder Morthen struck his staff against the floor 3 times. "Enough. The test is complete." Theron reached Kira in 2 strides, his hands framing her face, his eyes searching for injury. "Are you hurt? Did he—" "I'm fine," Kira assured him, still clutching the dagger. "I remembered what you taught me. Soft targets. Use their momentum." Something blazed in his eyes, pride and terror, and something else that made her breath catch. "You could have been killed, but I wasn't, because you taught me well." She smiled slightly. "And because we worked together. Isn't that what they wanted to see?" Theron's laugh was breathless and slightly unhinged. "You're insane, brave and brilliant, and completely insane." The elders had convened once more, their aged heads bent together. When they turned back to face the throne room, Elder Cassandra wore an expression that might have been approval. "The resonance test has been passed," she announced. Lady Kira demonstrated courage, tactical thinking, and perfect trust in her mate's teachings. His Majesty showed the willingness to abandon strategy to protect his queen. This is the mark of a true bond, where individual survival matters less than the survival of the pair. Kira's legs suddenly felt weak. 2 tests. They'd passed 2 impossible tests. 1 remained. "Tonight," Elder Morthen said, his voice carrying through the chamber. "At sunset, the final test will commence. The kiss of binding, the ultimate demonstration of a mate bond's truth." His ancient eyes swept across Theron and Kira. "Prepare yourselves, for this test cannot be faked. The moon goddess herself will judge whether your bond is blessed or false." As the alphas began filing out for the midday feast, Kira felt Theron's arm come around her waist, solid and steadying. "We need to talk," he murmured. "About tonight. About what the kiss of binding actually requires." The grim tone of his voice told Kira that whatever he was about to explain, It was going to be worse than she imagined. And she'd already imagined it would be impossible. Chapter 8. The Kiss of Binding. Theron led Kira to a private balcony, overlooking the mountains, away from the prying eyes and eager ears of the summit guests. The storm had passed, leaving the air crisp and clean, the peaks dusted with fresh snow that glowed in the afternoon light. The kiss of binding isn't just a kiss, Theron said, without preamble, his hands gripping the stone railing. It's a ritual that dates back centuries, designed to prove that a mate bond is genuine. Kira's stomach clenched. What makes it different from an ordinary kiss? Magic. Theron turned to face her, and his expression was grim. The elders will cast a circle of ancient power around us. When we kiss within that circle, if our bond is true, if the moon goddess has genuinely blessed our union, the magic will respond. Witnesses will feel the power of our connection. They'll see light, feel warmth, experience an echo of what we feel for each other. And if the bond is false, then nothing happens. The kiss is just a kiss, cold, empty, obvious to everyone watching that we're frauds. His jaw tightened. We'd be executed for treason within the hour. Kira's blood ran cold. So we're doomed. There's no way to fake magic. There might be one way. Theron's voice dropped. The ritual responds to genuine emotion, love, desire, connection. It doesn't specifically test for the mate bond itself. It tests for the truth of feeling between two wolves. Understanding dawned slowly. You're saying if there's real attraction, real emotion, even without the mate bond, the magic might respond anyway. Theron moved closer, and Kira could feel the heat radiating from him. Which means for this to work, for us to survive tonight, the kiss can't be an act. It has to be real. What we feel in that moment has to be genuine, or the magic will know. Kira's heart raced. But we barely know each other. How are we supposed to manufacture genuine feeling in a few hours? We don't manufacture it. Theron's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. We stop pretending it doesn't already exist. The words hung between them like a confession. I see you, Kira, Theron continued, his voice rough. I see your courage, your quick mind, the way you refuse to let anyone make you feel small. I see the wolf you are beneath the invisibility your pack forced on you. And what I see, he paused, something vulnerable flickering across his features. What I see terrifies me, because I swore I'd never let anyone close enough to hurt me again. But you're already closer than I intended. Kira's breath caught. Theron, and you feel it too, he said. Don't you? This pull between us that has nothing to do with pack politics or fake mate bonds. This thing that makes you lean toward me without thinking, that makes your pulse race when I touch you. She wanted to deny it. Wanted to claim that everything she felt was just the adrenaline of their dangerous deception, the natural response to an attractive male, anything other than genuine feeling, but she'd promised herself she was done with lies. Yes, she whispered, I feel it, and it scares me just as much as it scares you. Theron's eyes blazed with something fierce and hungry. Then tonight, when we stand in that circle, when every eye in the realm is watching, we stop being scared. We kiss like we mean it. We let whatever this is between us burn hot enough that the magic has no choice but to respond. And after? Kira asked. After the summit ends and we've fooled everyone? What happens to this thing between us then? Theron's expression shuddered slightly. Then we go back to the arrangement. 1 year of pretense, and you get your freedom. That hasn't changed. But his voice lacked conviction, and they both knew it. Before Kira could press further, the balcony doors opened. Alara stood there, her face anxious. My lady, it's time to prepare for the final ceremony. Madame Thorne is waiting. The gown Madame Thorne had created for the kiss of binding ceremony was even more breathtaking than the first pure white silk that seemed to glow with inner light, embroidered with silver thread in patterns that resembled moonlight on water. It was designed to evoke purity, innocence, the untouched potential of a mate bond newly formed. Kira felt like a fraud wearing it. Stop thinking so loudly, Madame Thorne commanded, adjusting the fitted bodice. You'll wrinkle your face with worry, and we don't have time to fix it. I'm about to kiss the Alpha King in front of the entire realm, Kira said. While magic tests whether we're lying, I think I'm entitled to a little worry. Worry won't help you. Madame Thorne met her gaze in the mirror, and for the first time, her expression softened slightly. But trust might. Do you trust him? Did she? Theron was dangerous, ruthless when necessary, capable of cold calculation that should terrify her. But he'd also been honest with her about his pain, his fears, his desperate need to protect what was his. He'd taught her to fight, instead of assuming she couldn't. He'd seen her when everyone else looked through her. Yes, Kira said. I trust him. Then that's all you need. Madame Thorne placed a final circlet on Kira's head, simpler than before, woven from silver and moonstone. Trust him. Trust yourself, and let the rest take care of itself. The great hall had been transformed for the ceremony. Every candle in the castle must have been gathered here, creating a sea of flickering light that made the space feel otherworldly. The assembled alphas formed a circle around a cleared space in the center, where intricate symbols had been painted on the floor in what looked like liquid silver. The 5 elders stood at cardinal points around the circle, their staffs planted firmly, their ancient voices already beginning the ritual chant in a language so old Kira didn't recognize it. And in the center of it all, waiting for her, stood Theron. He wore ceremonial robes of black and silver, his crown catching the candlelight, his sword at his hip. But it was his eyes that captured her, those molten gold eyes that tracked her every movement as she walked toward him. The crowd fell silent as Kira entered the circle. She could feel the magic immediately, a tingling against her skin, a weight in the air, a sense that something ancient and powerful was watching. Elder Cassandra raised her staff. We have gathered to witness the kiss of binding between His Majesty, King Theron Blackfang, and his chosen mate, Lady Kira of Silverpine. Let the moon goddess herself judge the truth of their bond. The chanting grew louder, and the silver symbols on the floor began to glow with pale light. Theron extended his hand, and Kira took it, letting him pull her close. Up this close, she could see the tension in his jaw, the slight tremor in his hands that spoke of nerves he'd never admit to. Ready? He murmured. No, but let's do it anyway. His smile was quick and genuine. Then his expression turned serious, and he lifted his other hand to frame her face. Kira, he said, loud enough for the assembled wolves to hear. From the moment I saw you, I knew. You were the missing piece I didn't know I needed. The answer to a question I'd stopped asking. Whatever comes after this moment, know that right now, in this instant, what I feel for you is real. The words were supposed to be part of the ceremony, romantic declarations for the audience. But Kira heard the truth beneath them, the confession he was making while pretending it was performance. Theron, she replied, her voice stronger than she expected. You saw me when I was invisible. You made me believe I could be more than what I was told I was. Whatever happens next, I'll never forget that you gave me that gift. The magic around them pulsed, responding to their words, growing brighter. The elders' chanting reached a crescendo, and Theron lowered his head, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that shattered every defense Kira had built around her heart. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't tentative. It was claiming and desperate and real, so real that Kira forgot they had an audience, forgot this was supposed to be an act. All she knew was the taste of him, the feel of his hands in her hair, the way he kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. She responded with equal fervor, her hands fisting in his robes, pulling him closer, losing herself in the sensation of being wanted, being seen, being kissed like she mattered more than kingdoms or crowns. The magic exploded around them. Light erupted from the circle, brilliant, blinding white light that made every witness gasp. Kira felt it wash through her like fire, felt it connect her to Theron in ways she couldn't explain, felt the truth of what burned between them made manifest for all to see. And in that moment of perfect clarity, Kira understood with devastating certainty. This wasn't fake anymore. Maybe it never had been. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the light slowly faded. But the afterglow remained a soft shimmer that clung to them both, visible proof of what had just transpired. The great hall erupted in shocked murmurs, and from many quarters applause. But Kira barely heard it. She was too busy staring at Theron, seeing her own revelation reflected in his eyes. They were in trouble. Deep, complicated, dangerous trouble. Elder Cassandra's voice cut through the noise. The moon goddess has spoken. The bond between His Majesty and Lady Kira is true and blessed. Let no wolf question it." The other elders echoed her declaration, and suddenly wolves were crowding forward, offering congratulations, pledging loyalty, celebrating the confirmation of their king's mate. Through it all, Theron kept Kira's hand firmly in his, anchoring her against the chaos. But she caught glimpses of faces in the crowd that weren't celebrating Alpha Lucian's calculating expression. Alpha Gareth's barely concealed resentment, and Seraphina's face, twisted with such rage and jealousy that it sent chills down Kira's spine. They'd passed the tests. They'd convinced everyone their bond was real, but they'd also painted a target on Kira's back. And as the celebration swirled around them, as wolves toasted their union with wine and empty platitudes, Kira couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger was only just beginning. If Theron's journey moved you, subscribe so you never miss a story about finding love when you've sworn never to feel again. And comment below, did you see that kiss coming? Or were you as blindsided as they were? Tell Kira she's not alone in falling for someone she swore she wouldn't. Chapter 9. The Aftermath. The celebration lasted well into the night, but Theron and Kira were finally allowed to retreat to the royal wing as midnight approached. The moment the doors to Theron's private study closed behind them, shutting out the noise and the watchful eyes, the careful composure they'd maintained all evening shattered. Theron paced like a caged wolf, his hands running through his hair, disheveling the careful style. That wasn't supposed to happen. Kira stood by the fireplace, still wearing the white gown, still feeling the phantom heat of his lips on hers. The magic responding? I thought that was exactly what was supposed to happen. Not the magic. He stopped pacing, pinning her with those golden eyes. The way I kissed you, the way you kissed me back. That wasn't acting, Kira. We both know it wasn't acting. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She could deny it, retreat behind safe lies and comfortable distance, or she could be brave enough to speak the truth. No, she said quietly. It wasn't. Theron's laugh was harsh, self-deprecating. I swore I wouldn't do this again. Wouldn't let anyone get close enough to. He cut himself off, turning away. This was supposed to be simple. A business arrangement. You play the queen for a year, I satisfy the council's demands, and then we part ways. Clean, uncomplicated. And now it's complicated, Kira finished. Impossibly so. He finally looked at her again, and the conflict in his expression made her chest ache. Because I meant what I said in that circle. Every word. You've gotten under my skin, little wolf, in ways I didn't think were possible anymore. Kira moved closer, drawn to him despite every rational warning screaming in her mind. So, what do we do? I don't know. His honesty was brutal. I don't know if I can give you what you deserve, a mate who isn't broken, who hasn't built walls so high even he can't see over them anymore. I don't know if I can be anything other than what 10 years of grief made me. I'm not asking you to be anything other than what you are, Kira said. I'm just asking if what we felt tonight, if that's something worth exploring. Even if it's terrifying. Even if it ends badly. Theron reached out, his fingers tracing the curve of her jaw with devastating gentleness. And what happens when the year ends? When you're supposed to take your gold and disappear? Do you really think I could let you walk away now? The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it made something fierce and wild sing in her blood. Then don't, she whispered. Don't let me walk away. Make me want to stay. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her again, might close the distance between them and damn all the complications. But a sharp knock at the door shattered the moment. Your Majesty. Commander Ryland's voice was urgent. We have a situation. Theron's expression shuddered immediately, the vulnerable male disappearing behind the mask of the king. Enter. Ryland burst through the door, his face grim. There's been an incident. One of the visiting alphas has filed a formal challenge. Kira's blood ran cold. What kind of challenge? A challenge of worth. Ryland's gaze flicked to her apologetically. Alpha Gareth has invoked an ancient right. He's demanding that Lady Kira prove she's worthy of the Queen's throne through trial by combat. Absolutely not. Theron growled, his power flaring so strongly that the candles flickered. I'll kill him myself before I let. Your Majesty, with respect, you can't. Ryland's voice was strained. The challenge of worth is protected by ancient law. If you refuse on Lady Kira's behalf, it's grounds for other alphas to question your authority. They could claim you're using your mate as a puppet, that she has no real power of her own. This is Gareth trying to destabilize my reign, Theron said flatly. He's been looking for an excuse since I refused his daughter's marriage proposal 5 years ago. Of course it is, Ryland agreed. But that doesn't make the challenge any less legal. Lady Kira must accept and face whatever trial Gareth sets, or you must dissolve the mate bond publicly and choose another. Kira felt the trap closing around them. If she refused the challenge, Theron would be humiliated, his authority questioned. But if she accepted, what does the trial involve? She asked. Ryland hesitated. That's Gareth's choice. As the challenger, he gets to set the terms. It could be anything from a test of strength to a battle of wits to single combat, came a voice from the doorway. They all turned to see Alpha Gareth himself standing there, flanked by 2 of his warriors. His smile was cruel, triumphant. I challenge Lady Kira to single combat, Gareth announced. Her against my champion. No assistance from His Majesty. No weapons beyond what she can carry herself. First blood ends the match. You want me to fight one of your warriors? Kira's voice was steadier than she felt. That's hardly fair. Life isn't fair, girl. Gareth's eyes glinted with malice. You want to be queen? Prove you have the strength to protect this realm. Prove you're not just some weak little wolf riding His Majesty's coattails to power. Every instinct screamed at Kira to refuse, to admit she couldn't possibly win against a trained warrior. But she saw the calculation in Gareth's eyes. He was counting on her refusing, counting on her proving she was exactly what he claimed. Weak, unworthy, a liability to Theron's reign. And suddenly, Kira was tired of being underestimated. I accept, she said clearly. Name your champion and the time. I'll be there. Gareth's smile widened. Tomorrow at dawn. In the training arena, my champion will be waiting. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh. And Lady Kira? My champion is Seraphina. She's been dying to test herself against you. He swept out, leaving shocked silence in his wake. No. Theron's voice was deadly calm, the kind of calm that preceded violence. Absolutely not. Seraphina has been training since childhood. She's one of the most skilled warriors in the realm. This isn't a fair fight, it's an execution. Which is exactly why I have to accept, Kira said. Because if I refuse now, after accepting the challenge publicly, it proves every doubt they have about me. It proves I'm not strong enough to stand beside you. I don't care about their doubts. Theron's control cracked, his power filling the room like a physical force. I care about keeping you alive. And I care about not being the weakness that brings down your throne. Kira's voice rose to match his. Don't you understand? Every alpha in that hall is waiting for me to fail. Waiting for proof that our bond is a political sham. That I'm just some convenient nobody you chose to avoid a real marriage. If I run from this fight, I confirm everything they suspect. So you'd rather die? I'd rather fight. The words burst from her with surprising ferocity. I've spent my entire life being told I'm not enough, not strong enough, not pretty enough, not worthy enough. I'm done accepting that. If I'm going to fall, I'm going to fall fighting. Silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Finally, Theron's shoulders sagged slightly. You won't be able to beat her in a straight fight. Seraphina has decades of training. Then I won't fight straight, Kira said. You told me yourself I'm smart, quick thinking, good at seeing opportunities others miss. So I'll fight the way I've survived everything else, by being unexpected. A reluctant smile tugged at Theron's lips. You really are insane. You chose me, remember? Kira moved closer, taking his hands in hers. You chose me because I was invisible, overlooked, underestimated. Well, now it's time to make that work in my favor. Theron pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. If anything happens to you, it won't, Kira promised, with more confidence than she felt. Because you're going to spend the next few hours teaching me everything you know about fighting someone better trained than I am. A few hours isn't enough time to then we'd better not waste a single minute. Kira pulled back, squaring her shoulders. "Commander Rylan, have the training arena prepared." "Your Majesty," she met Theron's eyes. "Teach me how to survive." The training arena was empty except for them, Kira, Theron, and Commander Rylan, who'd insisted on helping despite the late hour. Candles and magical light spheres illuminated the space, casting flickering shadows that danced across the weapons lining the walls. "First rule," Theron said, circling her with a practice sword in hand. "Forget everything about honor and fair fighting. Seraphina will be expecting you to follow conventional combat protocols. Don't cheat," Kira clarified. "Creatively problem solve," Rylan corrected with a grim smile. "There's a difference." For the next several hours, they put Kira through a brutal crash course. Theron taught her dirty tricks, where to strike to cause maximum pain with minimum strength, how to use an opponent's momentum against them, how to fake weakness to draw them in. Rylan focused on footwork and positioning, drilling her on how to move in ways that kept her opponent off balance, how to use the arena's space as a weapon. But it was Alara, arriving near dawn with healing supplies and unexpected wisdom, who provided the most crucial insight. "Seraphina is proud," Alara said, watching Kira practice. "Arrogant, even. She's so confident in her skills that she won't respect you as a real threat. Use that. Make her overconfident. Let her think she's winning right up until the moment you strike." As the sky began to lighten outside, Kira was exhausted, bruised, and more terrified than she'd ever been. But she was also ready. "The sun's rising," Theron said quietly, his hands gentle as he helped her into light, armor leather reinforced with metal plates, designed for mobility rather than heavy protection. "It's time," Kira nodded, too nervous to speak. Theron cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me. You are worthy. You've always been worthy. This fight doesn't determine your value. It just proves to these blind fools what I've known since the moment I met you, that you're stronger than anyone gives you credit for." "Theron, survive this," he continued, his voice rough with emotion. "Win or lose, just survive it, because I'm not ready to lose you, not when I've just found you." The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Kira rose on her toes and kissed him, brief but fierce, pouring everything she couldn't say into that contact. "I'll survive," she promised against his lips. "And when I do, we're going to figure out what this thing between us really is." Deal. The training arena was packed with spectators. Every alpha from the summit had gathered to watch, along with their retinues, creating a crowd that overflowed the viewing stands. The air buzzed with speculation and bloodlust. These wolves had come to see a spectacle, and they expected violence. Seraphina stood in the center of the arena, resplendent in crimson armor that matched her gown from the previous night. Her golden hair was pulled back in a warrior's braid, and she held a long sword with casual expertise that spoke of countless hours of practice. She looked like a goddess of war. Kira, in her simple leather armor and holding a short sword that felt too heavy in her grip, looked like a sacrifice. "Last chance to back out, little wolf," Seraphina called out, her voice carrying across the arena. "Yield now, and I'll make sure your death is at least quick." "Death?" Alpha Brennan's voice rose from the stands. "This was supposed to be first blood only." "Accidents happen in combat," Gareth said with mock sympathy. "I'm sure Lady Kira understands the risks." Theron stood at the edge of the arena, his hands clenched into fists, his power radiating in waves. Kira could feel his wolf straining against his control, desperate to intervene, to protect. But he couldn't. The rules were clear. Any interference would invalidate the challenge and prove Kira was too weak to stand alone. Elder Cassandra stepped forward, her ancient voice cutting through the noise. "The challenge of worth will now commence. Lady Kira of Silverpine against Champion Seraphina of Stormridge. First blood ends the match. Begin." Seraphina attacked immediately, not giving Kira time to think or prepare. Her blade whistled through the air with lethal precision, forcing Kira to dodge rather than block. She'd never be able to stop that much force directly. "Too slow," Seraphina taunted, pressing her advantage. "Is this really the best His Majesty could find? A clumsy little nobody who can barely hold a sword?" Kira didn't respond. She was too busy focusing on survival, on remembering everything Theron and Rylan had drilled into her. "Move," Don't meet strength with strength. Use her confidence against her. Serafina's next strike came high, and Kira ducked under it, rolling away to gain distance. The crowd murmured, impressed despite themselves that she'd avoided the blow. Running away? Serafina laughed. How very queen-like of you. Let her talk. Let her think she's winning. Kira kept retreating, kept dodging, kept looking increasingly desperate, and with each near miss, she saw Serafina's confidence grow, saw her attacks become more elaborate, more showy, playing to the crowd, rather than focusing on efficiency. That's the weakness. Serafina wound up for a massive overhead strike, powerful, dramatic, and completely committed. She was so sure it would connect that she put her full weight behind it, which meant when Kira didn't dodge backward like she'd been doing, when she instead stepped forward. Inside Serafina's guard, the larger female couldn't adjust her momentum. Kira's blade came up not aiming for Serafina's armored chest or protected limbs, but for the one exposed area on every warrior, the thin strip of skin where helmet met collar. Her sword's edge kissed Serafina's throat. Not deep, barely a scratch, but enough to draw a thin line of crimson. First blood. The arena fell silent. Serafina's eyes widened with shock and disbelief. Her hand came up to her throat, coming away red. Yield, Kira said quietly, her blade still pressed against Serafina's skin. First blood. I win. For a heartbeat, she thought Serafina might attack anyway, honor be damned. She saw the rage flash across that beautiful face, saw the calculations running behind violet eyes. Then Elder Cassandra's staff struck the ground. First blood to Lady Kira. The challenge of worth is complete. The arena erupted, some in celebration, others in shocked disbelief, still others in outrage that their anticipated spectacle had been cut short. But Kira barely heard it. She lowered her sword and stepped back, her entire body shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Serafina's expression promised murder. This isn't over, she hissed, too quiet for anyone else to hear. You humiliated me in front of everyone. I will make you pay for that, little queen. One way or another. Then she turned and stalked from the arena, leaving Kira alone in the center as the crowd's noise washed over her. Theron vaulted over the arena's barrier rules, be damned now that the challenge was over, and reached her in seconds. His arms came around her, pulling her against his chest with barely restrained desperation. You did it, he breathed against her hair. You insane, brilliant, terrifying female, you did it. Kira's laugh was slightly hysterical. I won. You won. He pulled back just enough to see her face, and the pride blazing in his eyes made something warm bloom in her chest. You proved to every alpha in this realm that you're worthy of standing beside a king. No, Kira corrected softly. I proved to myself that I'm worthy of standing on my own. Understanding flickered across Theron's face. Is that what this was really about? Not proving anything to them, but to yourself? Maybe. Kira smiled. Or maybe I'm just tired of being underestimated. Theron's laugh was genuine, full of surprised delight. You're going to be a terrifying queen, you know that? Good, Kira said. This realm could use a little terror. As they walked from the arena together, Kira didn't miss the looks on the assembled alphas' faces, grudging respect from some, continued skepticism from others, and from Alpha Gareth and Serafina, pure hatred, barely masked by political courtesy. She'd won this battle, but the war for acceptance, for legitimacy, for the right to stand beside Theron as his true equal, that war was only just beginning. Chapter 10. The Truth Between Crowns. 3 days after the Challenge of Worth, the summit finally concluded. Alphas departed Blackridge Mountain with their retinues, carrying stories of the mysterious queen who'd emerged from nowhere to capture their king's heart and prove her worth in combat. But not all of them left. Alpha Lucian requested a private audience with Theron, a meeting that made every instinct Kira possessed scream warnings. She stood beside Theron's throne as the snake-like Alpha entered the now quiet throne room, his expression radiating false concern. Your Majesty, Lucian began, his voice smooth as silk. I wanted to congratulate you personally on your mate's surprising victory. Lady Kira continues to exceed all expectations. Get to the point, Lucian, Theron said, his patience clearly exhausted after 3 days of political maneuvering. Lucian's smile sharpened. Very well, I'll be direct. There are wolves, influential wolves who question the timing of your sudden mate bond, who wonder if perhaps this was a convenient solution to the council's ultimatum rather than a genuine blessing from the moon goddess. Kira's blood ran cold. Despite passing all the tests, despite the magic's response to their kiss, there were still doubts. Are you calling my mate a liar? Theron's voice dropped to that dangerous register that preceded violence. Not at all, Lucian said quickly. I'm simply conveying concerns that have been expressed. After all, Lady Kira has no scent, no traditional markers of a mated wolf. The magic responded to your kiss. Yes, but magic can be influenced by skilled practitioners, and her victory over Seraphina, while impressive, could be attributed to luck rather than genuine capability. Then what do you want? Kira asked, surprising them both by speaking. What would it take to silence these doubts? Lucian turned his calculating gaze to her. Transparency. Allow the council to examine the bond more thoroughly. Submit to additional testing. Prove beyond any shadow of doubt that this isn't an elaborate deception designed to maintain His Majesty's throne. It was a trap. More testing meant more opportunities to expose flaws, to find inconsistencies, to catch them in their lie. But refusing would confirm every suspicion. No, Theron said flatly. My mate has proven herself 3 times over. She's passed every test, faced every challenge, and earned her place beside me. I won't subject her to further scrutiny, because you and your allies are uncomfortable with my choice. Then you leave us no option but to... But to what, Lucian? A new voice cut through the tension. Everyone turned to see Commander Rylan entering the throne room, followed by 2 warriors carrying what looked like official documents. Interesting timing, Commander, Lucian said coldly. Indeed. Rylan's smile was all teeth. Your Majesty, Lady Kira, I've just received some fascinating intelligence from our contacts in the Shadowvale territory. It seems Alpha Lucian has been conducting his own investigations into Lady Kira's background. Lucian's expression flickered just for a moment with something that looked like concern. Specifically, Rylan continued, moving to stand beside the throne. He's been searching for any evidence that Lady Kira might be less than truthful about her origins. Any proof that she might be part of some grand conspiracy. He paused meaningfully, which makes one wonder why would Alpha Lucian invest so much time and resources into discrediting our queen, unless he had his own reasons for wanting His Majesty's throne destabilized. That's a serious accusation, Lucian said, his voice tight. As serious as questioning the mate bond blessed by the moon goddess herself? Rylan handed one of the documents to Theron. These are financial records showing substantial payments from Alpha Lucian's personal accounts to various wolves with ties to anti-royalist factions. Payments that increased dramatically after His Majesty announced his mate bond. Theron's eyes scanned the documents, and his expression turned to carved stone. You've been funding rebellion. I've been supporting wolves who share legitimate concerns about concentrated power, Lucian corrected smoothly. There's a difference between treason and political discourse. Not when that discourse involves assassinating my mate to destabilize my reign. Theron stood, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Did you think I wouldn't discover your involvement with the plots against Kira? The accidents that have been narrowly avoided over the past 3 days? The poisoned wine that was caught before reaching her lips? The loosened stone that nearly fell on her head? Kira's heart hammered. She'd known about one of those incidents, the wine, but not the others. Someone had been actively trying to kill her, and Theron had been silently protecting her without telling her the full extent of the danger. You have no proof I was involved in any of that, Lucian said, but his confidence was cracking. I have enough proof to bring you before the Council of Elders on charges of conspiracy, Theron said. But I'm going to offer you a choice instead. Leave Blackridge Mountain now. Withdraw your support from the anti-royalist factions, and never question my mate's legitimacy again. Do that, and I'll consider these assassination attempts a misunderstanding. And if I refuse? Theron's smile was cold as winter. Then I'll demonstrate exactly why wolves fear the Black Fang line. Your choice, Lucian. Make it quickly. For a long moment, Lucian stared at Theron, clearly weighing his options. Then his gaze slid to Kira, and something ugly flickered across his face. "You've won this round, little queen," he said quietly. "But remember, crowns are heavy things. And wolves who weren't born to wear them often find the weight crushing." Then he turned and left, his departure feeling less like a retreat and more like a postponement. When the throne room doors closed behind him, Kira finally released the breath she'd been holding. "He tried to have me killed. Multiple times." "Yes." Theron's voice was carefully controlled, but she could feel the fury radiating from him. "And if Rylan hadn't been investigating, if our intelligence network hadn't caught wind of his plans, he might have succeeded." You should have told me. I didn't want to frighten you. You had enough to worry about with the challenge." "I'm your queen," Kira said, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. "Fake or not, that means I need to know when someone's trying to murder me. Don't protect me by keeping me ignorant, Theron. Protect me by trusting me with the truth." Something shifted in Theron's expression, respect, mixed with what might have been shame. "You're right. I'm sorry. It won't happen again." Rylan cleared his throat diplomatically. "If you'll excuse me, Your Majesty, I have wolves to debrief." "Lady Kira," he bowed to her, and there was genuine respect in the gesture. "You handled that with remarkable composure." His Majesty chose well. After Rylan left, silence settled over the throne room. Kira moved to stand beside Theron, both of them staring at the empty space where Lucian had stood. "It's not going to stop, is it?" Kira said quietly. "Even after passing all the tests, proving myself in combat, surviving assassination attempts, there will always be wolves who question whether I belong here." "Probably," Theron admitted. "Power attracts challenges the way blood attracts sharks. There will always be someone looking for weakness to exploit. And I'm your weakness now." It wasn't a question. Theron turned to face her fully, his hands coming up to frame her face. "No, you're my strength. The wolves who think otherwise don't understand what strength actually means. Theron, I love you." The words hung in the air between them, raw and unexpected. Kira's breath caught. "What?" "I love you," Theron repeated, and this time his voice was stronger, more certain. "I didn't mean to. I fought against it. I told myself it was just the act, just the necessity of convincing others. But somewhere between your courage in accepting this insane arrangement and your refusal to let anyone make you feel small, I fell in love with you." Tears pricked at Kira's eyes. "We barely know each other. I know you're brave enough to walk into the den of the most dangerous predator alive and agree to his desperate scheme. I know you're smart enough to survive a combat trial against an opponent who should have destroyed you. I know you call me on my protective bullshit and refuse to be treated like you're fragile." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "I know that when you kiss me, I forget every reason I swore never to love again." "What else do I need to know?" "That I love you too," Kira whispered. "That I fell for you the moment you looked at invisible me and decided I was exactly what you needed. That this stopped being fake for me somewhere around the second test, and I've been terrified ever since because I never thought someone like you could actually want someone like me." "Someone like me?" Theron's laugh was incredulous. "Kira, I'm a broken king who built walls so high I trapped myself inside them. You're the one who scaled those walls without even trying. You're the one who made me remember what it feels like to hope." Kira rose on her toes, pulling him down into a kiss that was nothing like the performance in the binding circle. This was private, real, full of promises they were both finally brave enough to make. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Theron rested his forehead against hers. "So what now?" he asked. "The original arrangement was 1 year, then your freedom and enough gold to disappear." "I don't want to disappear," Kira said. "I want to stay. I want to figure out what it means to be your queen, really be your queen, not just play the part. I want to face whatever comes next together, even though it will be dangerous, even though there will always be wolves like Lucian trying to tear us apart, especially because of that." Kira smiled. "Someone needs to remind this realm that underestimating the invisible wolf is a mistake, and someone needs to remind you that you don't have to face everything alone anymore." Theron's kiss this time was gentle, reverent, full of gratitude and wonder. "I don't deserve you." Probably not," Kira agreed, then laughed at his mock-offended expression. But you're stuck with me anyway. For better or worse, I'm not going anywhere. Good, Theron said, pulling her closer. Because I wasn't planning on letting you leave. They stood there in the empty throne room, as afternoon light streamed through the high windows, two wolves who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances imaginable. The scentless wolf who'd spent her life being invisible. The broken king who'd sworn never to love again. Together, they'd deceived an entire realm into believing their bond was blessed by the moon goddess. But the greatest deception of all was the one they'd played on themselves, pretending that what burned between them was anything other than real. Epilogue. 6 months later, Kira stood on the balcony overlooking Blackridge's courtyard, watching as Theron trained with a group of young wolves from various packs. He'd started the program 3 months ago, an initiative to bring promising warriors to the capital for advanced training, building bridges between territories that had spent too long viewing each other as rivals. It was one of many changes they'd implemented together. The Queen's Council, which Kira had established to give female wolves a voice in realm governance. The reform of succession laws to include merit alongside bloodline. The network of safe houses for wolves fleeing abusive packs. Slowly, painfully, they were transforming the northern territories into something better than what they'd inherited. My lady? Alara appeared at her elbow, her expression bright with barely contained excitement. The healer is here. She says she has news. Kira's heart kicked into overdrive. She'd suspected for weeks, but hadn't dared to hope. The royal healer was an elderly she-wolf, with kind eyes and gentle hands. She conducted her examination with practiced efficiency, then stepped back with a smile. Congratulations, Your Majesty. You're approximately 8 weeks along. The world tilted. A child. She was carrying Theron's child, the heir the council had demanded, the legacy they'd both secretly wanted but been too afraid to speak of. Thank you, Kira managed, her voice thick with emotion. Please don't tell anyone yet. I want to tell His Majesty myself. The healer bowed and departed, leaving Kira alone with the knowledge that would change everything. She found Theron later that evening in their shared chambers. Yes, shared. Because somewhere around month 2 they'd abandoned the pretense of separate bedrooms. He was studying reports, his reading glasses perched on his nose in a way that made him look endearingly scholarly rather than terrifying. You're staring, he said without looking up. I'm appreciating, Kira corrected, moving to stand beside his desk. There's a difference, is there? He finally looked up, and his expression softened when he saw whatever was written on her face. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's. She paused, searching for words. Everything's changing. Again, Theron set down his papers, giving her his full attention. Changing how? Kira took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. We're going to need to start preparing the royal nursery. For a moment, Theron just stared at her, not comprehending. Then understanding dawned, and the expression that crossed his face made Kira's eyes sting with happy tears. You're where he couldn't seem to finish the sentence. Pregnant. About 8 weeks. The healer confirmed it this afternoon. Theron was on his feet in an instant, his hands framing her face, his eyes searching hers with wonder and terror and joy all mixed together. Are you sure? Are you healthy? Do you need to sit down? Should I call the healer back? Kira laughed through her tears. I'm fine. We're fine. I'm not fragile, remember? You're carrying my child, Theron said, his voice raw. You're the most precious thing in my world, and now there's going to be another life depending on us. Forgive me if that makes me a little protective. A little? Kira teased, but she understood. Because she felt it too, the fierce, overwhelming need to protect this new life they'd created. I love you, Theron said, pulling her into his arms. I love you so much it terrifies me. And now we're going to bring a child into this dangerous, complicated world, and I'm going to spend every day making sure they grow up knowing they're loved, knowing they're valued, knowing they never have to be invisible to be seen. Kira buried her face against his chest, breathing in that familiar scent of pine and smoke that had become home. They're going to be so loved, so incredibly loved. Just like their mother, Theron murmured against her hair. Later, as they lay tangled together in their bed, Kira thought about the journey that had brought them here, the desperate deception that had turned into truth, the fake mate bond that had become more real than anything she'd ever known. She'd walked into Blackridge Mountain, expecting to play a role for a year, and then disappear. Instead, she'd found a king who saw her worth when no one else did. A love that burned bright enough to light even the darkest corners of their scarred hearts. And a future that promised not invisibility, but legacy. "What are you thinking about?" Theron asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "That I'm glad your desperate plan to avoid a political marriage led you to me," Kira said. "That I'm glad I was brave enough to say yes to something terrifying. That I'm glad we were both fool enough to fall in love when we were supposed to be pretending." Theron's laugh rumbled through his chest. "Best decision I ever made. Choosing the invisible wolf who turned out to be the most extraordinary creature in the realm." "I'm not extraordinary," Kira protested. "You're my queen," Theron said simply. "Mother of my child. The wolf who walked into my darkness and refused to let me stay there. If that's not extraordinary, I don't know what is." Kira tilted her head up to kiss him, slow and sweet, and full of promises for the future they'd build together. Outside their window, the moon rose full and bright over Blackridge Mountain, bathing the realm in silver light. And somewhere, perhaps, the moon goddess herself smiled, because the rejected wolf who sat alone at the mating ceremony had found exactly what she needed in the most unexpected place. Not a pretend mate who would give her freedom after a year, but a real mate who gave her something far more valuable. A love that transformed invisibility into power, loneliness into belonging, and two broken wolves into something whole.